insights and expertise. This study session is to look at homelessness in Burlingame and potential programs that might be deployed and that our neighbors are deploying. So with that, we don't do all of the pledge and all that before a study session, correct? So we can just launch in. Am I right? Yes.
Right. Yes.
I'm right.
I thought you were talking, Megan.
Either one. In which case then I will hand it over to whom?
I will start us off. This study session came up a result of the mayor reading, I think, an article and maybe talking to friends in Millbrae about the program that they have and wanting us to talk about it here. And so I asked Jeremy Kirshner, assistant to the city manager, to run with it. And so he's going to come up and give a staff report. And he has a whole lot of people with a lot of knowledge about these issues who are also in attendance and can help with any questions you have. That I'll ask Jeremy to come on up.
I appreciate that very much. And I guess maybe by way of context, so that reading about the Life Moves in Millbrae and county partnership seemed very interesting. There are, as I understood it, the city of Millbrae had determined to explore a program like this in part because they're the terminus of the BART line. And of course, the BART line is basically on the border with Burlingame. So I thought it would be interesting. It seemed to me that it was also useful for us to be ahead of the curve and sort of understand what we might use in the future, even if we don't have a significant problem today. So that was sort of the context for this session.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Excuse me, there's somebody, a member of the public is texting me for the link. So I'm just going to take care of that real quick, Jeremy. I'm so sorry.
Sure.
But Carrie,
should I wait or?
He may carry on, or would you like him to wait?
I'm saying, please carry on.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, I look like I'm distracted. It's that I'm trying to send Elizabeth Bernard the link.
Good.
Sorry, I just wanted to let you guys know. I'm so sorry.
Okay, well, Mayor Brownrigg, Vice Mayor Coulson, council members, good evening. As Lisa mentioned, I'm Jeremy Kirshner. I'm assistant to the city manager. Tonight, I'm going to give a brief presentation on homelessness in Burlingame. Next slide. So some of the topics I'm going to cover are actual homelessness within the city of Burlingame, but also our neighbor Millbrae's experience with homelessness, as well as their contract with Life Moves. I'm going to give an overview of the shelter system in San Mateo County, a really quick one-slide summary, a case study with an individual who received homelessness services within the county, and then some options for further direction. And I also want to caveat everything I'm about to say with, I am not a homelessness expert, but I did bring a lot of people who are homelessness experts with me. We have Isabel Carlos, and you may want to raise your hand, mention your name, who is assistant city manager for Millbrae. She oversees their contract with Life Moves. We have Linda Wallen from Supervisor Black's office. We have Sarah Fields from Life Moves headquarters. We have Lynette Reynoso, who is a lead case manager for Life Moves, who oversees San Mateo and Burlingame. We have Terry Bosch from Call Primrose, executive director. We have Michael, whose story I'm going to talk about. We have our police chief, Mike Matucci, who's shared a lot of helpful data on homelessness in Burlingame. We also have Matthew Hayes from the County Human Services Agency here. So we have a lot of expertise in the room. Next slide, please. So according to every year, the county conducts a one-day homeless count. And though between 2019 and 2022, there was a gap due to the pandemic. But during the 2022 homeless count, the county counted 1,092 people experiencing unsheltered homelessness within the county. Of those, 10 were in Burlingame, and that is down from 25 in 2019. But we need to take that data with a grain of salt because that's a one-day snapshot. That's just a quick overview of the city from county employees who may not be as familiar with the city as we are. It's also really difficult to tell if somebody's experiencing homelessness. It's maybe easier if they're in an encampment. It's much harder if they're in a car. It's hard to tell if you're living there or just in your car. And, since it is a one-day snapshot, it could represent, maybe not a typical day in Burlingame. So we could have over or under representation.
Can I ask, sorry.
Sure.
So as a matter of definition, if somebody is experiencing, quote, unsheltered homelessness, that counts living in a car? Or
so I will defer, but I believe it does. Yes, it does.
Okay. So in other words, if you're living in a car, we will count you as an unsheltered homeless. Okay.
Yeah. So this kind of contrasts with the police department's experience with homelessness. After interviewing our police chief, he, just based on data, calls for service. It appears that on any given night, maybe 3 to 6 people were experiencing unsheltered homelessness within the city. And maybe there were 1 to 2 long-term encampments. But once again, it's really hard to find where everyone is. Making this even harder is the people experiencing homelessness in Burlingame are often not staying here long-term. They're simply moving through the city. So they may be here for a day or two, but they may be on their way to somewhere else. So, you know, the next day they may be gone and somebody else may have taken their place. So next slide, please. So right now, the city of Burlingame does not have a contract with Life Moves. However, we do receive services from Life Moves through a contract between the county and Life Moves. And through that contract, there is one lead case manager assigned for San Mateo and Burlingame. That's Lynette Reynoso, is here, and happy to answer any questions you may have. So based on my discussion with Lynette, it seems like she spends most of her time in San Mateo because that's where the need for services is. There's a larger population of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness. She'll often start her day at St. Vincent de Paul because that's where people who need services are. That's where the services are. Additionally, she'll work on services like a mobile medical clinic, which has a street medicine team that's able to offer medical services to people experiencing homelessness. So generally, when Life Moves comes to Burlingame, it's as a result of a call from the police department for a request for help or a church. But generally, once the police ask Life Moves to respond, they have a really difficult task of trying to find the person when we just discussed that people move around really frequently. Oftentimes that'll start with providing for somebody's basic needs to establish a rapport, like maybe providing something like food. Once a rapport is provided, Life Moves is better able to refer people to shelters or other services. But one complicating factor is there's a 90-day residency requirement to get into a shelter in San Mateo County. There are ways to count this, but it's really difficult when people are moving around. Life Moves will work to establish that 90-day residency, but if a person doesn't meet it, then Life Moves will work to either get them transportation to a place where they may have housing or other services, or they may refer them to services that they are eligible for. Next slide, please. So I kind of want to compare and contrast our experience with homelessness in Millbrae. So in 2019 and 2022, the county one-day homeless count found 9 people experiencing unsheltered homelessness in Millbrae. And in contrast to what our police department is seeing, staff and residents in Millbrae felt that, if anything, they were seeing far more people experiencing unsheltered homelessness than the 9 they counted. So staff conducted an informal homeless count there and found many more quickly. And as you were explaining, Mayor Brownrigg, Millbrae may be having a different experience because they are the terminus for a major transportation operation. They're the end of the line for BART, so people may naturally get off here. They may get kicked off of a train here. So that it's a natural place for people to be funneled. Next slide, please. So that brings us to how Millbrae got in touch with Life Moves. City staff met with Supervisor Pine's office and the county HSA in 2021, and they agreed to together fund a pilot program, which started in 2021. It was originally scheduled to go for 1 year, but it ended up being about 18 months and ended in December of 2022. Through this pilot program, Life Moves offered case management services, which meant they would work to find people shelter and connect them to other services they may need. You know, it's hard to call the pilot program anything other than a resounding success. They had 415 interventions during that time, of which 233 people were placed in temporary shelters. But this wasn't for free. It cost a decent amount of money. The pilot program's total cost was $242,000, of which $142,000 was provided by the county and $100,000 was provided by Millbrae. And this covered 2 full-time Life Move staff members that were dedicated to serving people at the BART station, at Millbrae BART. So next slide, please. So now the program in December 2022, the city and county decided based on the success of the pilot program that they would extend it. So currently there's a contract in place through June of 2024. and by all means, it's going well again. And this time, the county awarded Millbrae an additional $370,000, and Millbrae provided an additional $142,000. And this covers 2 full-time Life Moves employees. I hope I'm getting this correct. And they cover now the Millbrae BART station as well as downtown Millbrae. So next slide, please. Now for a brief overview of the county shelter system. So the county has a coordinated entry system, which means all the shelters work together. They're not operating in isolation. They talk about how many beds they have that are available with each other. And then within this coordinated entry system, there are 2 types of shelters. We have congregate shelters, which are kind of what we stereotypically would imagine a homeless shelter is. A lot of beds near each other, not a lot of privacy or room for storage. And then you also have non-congregate shelters, which are generally like a repurposed motel. They offer a little bit more privacy, and they may be a better option for families or couples or those who may be hesitant to access shelter. And then this picture I have on the slide here is the new Navigation Center in Redwood City, which is a non-congregate shelter. So generally, as I mentioned earlier, people's first experience with this program is contact with the police department or a church maybe, then Life Moves, who then kind of usher them through the process of being entered into a shelter. But if a person were to approach this on their own, they would generally start with a core services agency. For Burlingame, that would be Samaritan House. And so that's considered a coordinated point of entry for homelessness services. That includes food, shelter, healthcare, financial services. They can cover a lot of different things there. And as I mentioned earlier, not everybody qualifies though. There's a 90-day residency requirement and there are other restrictions. And I kind of want, the next slide will show us, next slide, will show us kind of a person who had a difficult time navigating this. So a local creative design executive, Michael, is here today. There are a lot of Michaels in the room too, so I'll try and—
Not our fault.
Yeah, I'll be more specific. So he dealt with the loss in the family and had a couple other things in his life happening, and he ended up losing his housing, and ended up at a camp in Coyote Point, where he started to utilize Call Primrose services, a wonderful local organization based, not far from here, offers incredible services, food for families who need it. I think they offered, was it 76,000 meals last year? 76,000 bags of groceries for individuals. So they do a lot of good. From Call Primrose, he was referred to Samaritan House, but they only offered him congregate shelter, which was not a good fit at the time. So Terry Bosch of Call Primrose had to work closely with Life Moves and Samaritan House to get Michael the services he needed. She had to act as an advocate for him through a confusing system. And, without an advocate in the system, who knows if any services would have been obtained. It's just, while we have a lot of services available, it can be really difficult to navigate the system. But eventually, after 9 months, luckily, Michael was able to enter El Camino House, which is a non-congregate shelter in San Mateo with 44 temporary units, or units of temporary accommodations. He now has contract work available to him. Have you started yet? He started it. Okay, so he's back working. While the shelter system is not perfect, thank goodness he is in a shelter now. Next slide, please. So that brings us to what can we do? So we face a homelessness problem like the rest of San Mateo County. However, our experience is a little bit different than our neighboring city of Millbrae. Millbrae is a larger population of those experiencing homelessness, partially because they're a transit terminus. We have a couple Caltrain stops in the city, but we're not the end of the line, and Caltrain has really strict transit ticket enforcement. So it is harder to get on Caltrain. And I also think it would be dishonest if we did not acknowledge we are probably benefiting greatly from Millbrae's program. People who would probably walk down to Burlingame end up receiving services before they get here in the first place. So people, and in addition to all that, we're not a destination. We don't offer a ton of services for those experiencing homelessness. So likely people are just passing through, as I mentioned earlier. But that doesn't mean there's nothing we can do. There are some steps we can take. In this chart here, I ranked the ease of city implementation, And the cost of some of these ideas, these are just general guesses. They may be more or less. And we'd have to do more research to find out the exact cost. But one thing we could do is start with the first box, which is a city-sponsored homelessness count. Millbrae conducted an informal count. Redwood City did a count as well to get more accurate numbers. But you know, that may be a good place for Burlingame to start. Yes,
Yeah,
sorry.
can I ask a question about the Millbrae count. Was that with was city staff or was hired somebody from the outside?
I'm going to defer to you.
As well, you come to.
You want to come up to the mic?
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of the City Council. Yes, to answer your question, we didn't conduct one with staff, but we worked with all our partners. So we discussed the issue with Life Moves with staff as well from Millbrae and by observing as well. So it wasn't a homeless traditional count, but it was researching the individuals that were.
But it was conducted by city staff.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So, you know, this would have some of the same problems as the county homeless count, which is, you know, this is a snapshot in time still. This isn't necessarily tracking people over time. But, you know, we know the city well as staff. So we may be able to conduct a more accurate count. So that's the first idea. Next, another thing we could look into is regular Life Moves office hours. Right now, while Life Moves has a lead case manager that covers Burlingame and San Mateo, you know, but most of the need is in San Mateo, so that's where she's often based. Something we could do is set up regular office hours at maybe the rec center, the library, some public area where people can come and ask for services on their own. We'd have to see maybe through a pilot program whether there's demand for this, but it's certainly something we could explore. And then next, if we wanted to explore a program like Millbrae's with hiring a full-time Life Moves employee as a case manager. So we got an estimate from Life Moves. We need to, you know, talk to discuss more specifics, but it would likely be 150,000 to 200,000 per employee. So our current lead case manager has told me during my discussion with her that she's generally able to respond to all the calls she gets from the police department, but if that changes, we can reassess. All I ask is that if this is something that we do want to pursue, you know, we would need more time to figure out, is there this demand for case management services that we'd get if we were to pursue that route? Another option we could pursue that other cities have is an internal homeless liaison. San Mateo has 2 that are in their police department. So essentially they kind of act as supplementary case management staff. They work in conjunction with Life Moves. The liaisons would be potentially employees. We'd have to keep in mind that that would be really expensive. We'd have 2 new employees as a city. And it would also take a lot of staff time and effort to research these positions and get that position up and running. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, we have 3 to 6 people on any given night experiencing homelessness. So is there a demand for additional case management services at this point is a question we need to look into more. In the same box is a psychologist. This is something that Star Vista, who Vice Mayor Colson is very familiar with and can probably speak to more. Star Vista worked with several cities using county funding to embed a psychologist with police departments, I think generally on a contract basis. And they will respond to calls for those experiencing homelessness, but also those experiencing general psychiatric situations. So it maybe would reduce dependence on law enforcement in that situation. So something we need to keep in mind with that, South San Francisco, who I spoke with, had a really good experience and is really happy with the work they're getting from their psychologist. But funding was available at the time. So we would need to explore if funding is still available. And if not, we'd have to be prepared to foot the bill. And that would require additional staff research. Then this next box is probably the key solution. Oh, sorry. Vice Mayor,
Quick question on
please.
this. I mean, so you have cost as high for both the liaison position and the psychologist, but the psychologist would be more of a consultant.
Yeah,
So I'm assuming that's actually a lower.
it would
cost.
likely be a lower cost. I need to check my figures again, but I think last I spoke with South San Francisco, the contract was less than $100,000.
Okay.
So it's probably a little bit more cost effective. So now to this next box, which is probably the most important, but the hardest solution by far, which is at the end of the day, this is a housing issue. We need more housing, not just as a city, but as a region and as a state. We already have thousands of units in the pipeline, so we're doing a good job there, and there's more work to do. But you know, affordable housing, easier said than done, but more affordable housing would of course be helpful. And then the third thing is preserving existing naturally occurring affordable housing, which may not be deed restricted, but it's housing that may not have the frills of these new developments that we're getting, but it's more affordable for people who want to live in Burlingame. So that's an important thing to consider. And then the last one I have is we provide donations every year to 4 of these local organizations that are doing fantastic work for the community. We could always consider either upping the donations or on a contract basis, working with these organizations to provide additional services for the city. So just a quick overview, called Primrose provides groceries to tens of thousands of families who need them. HIP Housing works to find room sharing situations and low cost leases for people who may have a barrier to entry. So creative solutions to our housing crisis. Life Moves, of course, we talked about them a lot. They provide amazing case management and other services throughout the county and for Burlingame. And then Star Vista, who we just talked about as well, which provides more services for those who have psychiatric needs. So we have a lot of organizations doing amazing work, and we could probably, amend our relationship with them for more services. And then beyond this chart, there is one step that we recently took as a city, which is the county. Thank you so much, Matthew, for including us in. They are beta testing an app, which allows city employees to report the locations of those who may be experiencing homelessness or an encampment. So it allows us to talk directly to the county once we submit something. Then the county can dispatch Life Moves quickly once they receive something in the app. So there are more creative solutions coming to this. But so that's the end of the options I have. Of course, there may be more options that you want to discuss that I haven't listed. We can consider a combination of anything I listed here, but I wanted to open it up for questions, not just for me, but for all the experts we have out here.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Kershaw. That's a really good overview, and I'm glad we do have half an hour. This really is a study session. This is really meant to be a conversation. We didn't come in here with an agenda, so I hope that we can hear from all of you. There won't be a clock. This is really meant to be a conversation. But just before I go to the audience, and by the way, real tip of the hat to Millbrae. I mean, the reason we're here is because of that program you guys helped initiate. And at least my rough math is if you have successfully housed 415 people in 18 months, that's 1.5 people a day. I mean, that's remarkable. So real kudos to the city of Millbrae. But just before we go to the audience, I'd like to invite our chief of police up, in part because I think very often government asks law enforcement to do things that are not always, in their sweet spot or what they're most comfortable doing. So I'd like to just hear from the chief how you see the burden on your force and your own, both in terms of capacity and also, is this a mission you'd want to see expanded, or would you be more comfortable if there was some outside help? You know where I'm going with that.
Yeah. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Council. So I think that, the officers do a really great job dealing with, people struggling with homelessness, balancing, route calls for service and everything else that, everybody complaining about traffic on their streets and retail theft. And so the officers have a lot on their plate. And so, but I think they do a really great job dealing with that. And we ask them a lot, we get calls, and not only do the officers handle calls, but we also tell them to be cognizant of people, if they see people, to go and approach them, and see if we can help. So we're doing outreach ourselves. But I think anything extra would help. I think that Life Moves and Star Vista are great partners. They do, amazing work with us. We couldn't do what we do without them, assisting. And so if we could bring in, anything extra we can do, anything we can bring in to augment what we try to do, I think would help for sure. We have, you were kind enough to give us 2 officers a few years ago, and they're our community response team, and they're kind of our liaison with the with Star Vista and with Life Moves, and they go out and do a lot of outreach as far as homeless in Burlingame. So we certainly have 2 officers and teams set up that can be our liaisons to anything that you may want to set up. So we're in position to help in any way we can as well.
Thank you, Chief. Council Member Beach.
Thanks, Chief. Just a follow-up question. I appreciate your comments specifically on the issue of a potential psychologist sort of as a liaison that may or may not may have some expertise with people experiencing homelessness, but could participate in other kinds of calls. Is that something that your team has studied or heard? Maybe we need more data on that, but do you have any initial thoughts on that?
Well, I believe there's 4 agencies that are experimenting with in-house mental health person. I think it's the big cities like South San Francisco, Redwood City, San Mateo, and I believe Daly City. And I haven't heard exactly how that's helping, but it was put in place as a pilot program to see if we could expand into other cities. And we certainly, when they initially talked about it, we felt like if it was something that was successful, we would absolutely want to explore that. So, but it was more for the mental health side of police work and, people struggling with that. And, with just having like a disturbance at their home with their family or something. It was kind of that. It wasn't necessarily.
There could be overlap, but
it absolutely 100% could be overlap.
Okay. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions at this point for the Chief? Thank you, Chief. I just wanted, oh, sorry, yes.
This may not be for the chief, but I'm curious about the 3-month residency requirement to move people into either a non-congregational or a congregational facility, since many of the people are on, I don't want to say temporarily here in Burlingame, but they're going to be temporarily almost in any community. So I'm just curious about why that restriction or why that requirement. What's the rationale?
Yeah, I don't know. That's probably a question for somebody else. And although I know that we do, when we contact, people suffering from homelessness, we do offer shelters, and a lot of times that happens. So I'm not sure if it's the long-term shelters that they can't use if it's 90 days, or if it's a short-term. So maybe somebody else here would be better equipped to answer that question.
Yeah, at the right time, that would be great to hear.
Thank you, Chief. Are there, for colleagues, any other questions for Mr. Kirschner before we open it up to the number of experts in the room? All right. Thank you, Chief. And so in no particular order, I'd welcome, this is meant to be a conversation, welcome your thoughts about the issue, what the city of Burlingame might be looking at, might do to help. I know we don't have a massive homeless problem, but I think we can see trends, and I think it's helpful for us to be ready with ideas and solutions. So would anyone like to join us with their thoughts on the issue? Terry, please. Thanks for getting us started.
Okay. So thank you for having me, council, and for having my friend Michael here also. And I think the first thing that maybe we should do is figure out what we're trying to accomplish. Are we trying to get people off the streets, or are we trying to help people like Michael? And of the 1,000 or so that were housed initially through this program, I'd love statistics on how many are still in that shelter, how many have taken a step beyond, how many that might have been using are now sober or getting those resources. Because I've been down with Michael out of my lane. We feed people, and I think we're pretty good at it. Maybe 4% of those that we serve are unhoused, meeting the criteria that we've talked about here today. And we care for them as much as we do for all of our other clients. This was somebody who, in a situation, I know Jeremy's been working really hard to maintain privacy and clearly, you know, that ship has sailed. Michael is here and he's brave enough to come here and share and answer any questions you may have. It shouldn't have taken 8 months to get Michael housed. And the irony is he is housed in a place run by the same organization where I started 8 months ago that said, nope, community shelter or nothing. It didn't work. I went through the process and the process is broken. I then reached out to people. I think I told a couple of my friends on the council and with the county's office that I've never reached out beyond the scope of what I do, but this was my mulligan. This is somebody that is exactly what that navigation center is designed for. Supportive housing, somebody that needs a little help getting back on track emotionally, not a substance abuser, not a violent person, not a criminal, is ready to re-engage in his life. And it took 8 months to get a roof over his head. And not only did that happen, we got him temporarily housed with the grant when nothing else would work. And he was denied an assessment because he had housing. So I had to wait till 3 days. Michael had to wait till 3 days before his housing expired. So I know today is not the day to talk about what was really happening in the shelters. And again, you know, staying in my lane, but the path to house this gentleman, it should not have taken 8 months. I should not have had to pull a mulligan. I should not have had to convene a group of private citizens to use their dollars to help. The system should have worked for him. And for every Michael that has an advocate, there are, you know, 20, maybe you think 3 or 4 in Burlingame, many more behind him that don't have someone like called Primrose and those connections that we have standing up for them. So, and we've dealt with, Lynette is wonderful. You know, I have to be very honest, we dealt with someone not so wonderful. And we could have lost Michael as a result of that if we hadn't had that relationship at call. We're not selling curtains, you know, we're dealing with people's lives. It's not a good salesperson or a bad salesperson. People have to be qualified. People have to know what they're talking about. And the system has to be fixed. It absolutely has to be fixed. We hurt him by housing him. He missed a shot at the navigation center. He didn't get in, it was full by the time his 3 days to assessment were open. So again, I know way more than I ever wanted to know about this, because now that I know, I can't do nothing. But I just would love to see, we'll continue to always do what we do. We're so grateful to the city of Burlingame that helps make our lives easier down the road. But this particular problem, this particular situation, until we decide what we want to do, are we helping or are we getting people off our streets? I think we have to be really honest with ourselves on that one and then proceed accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. Anyone else like to come and share? Thank you, Sarah.
Good evening, Sarah Fields with Life Moves. I want to respond to a couple of the questions that came from council. First to Mayor Brownrigg, in the point in time count where there's a question of sheltered versus unsheltered, someone who is living in an interim housing site, not a permanent supportive housing site, not transitional housing, but in a shelter that's meant to be lived in for maybe 3 to 6 months, that's considered sheltered homelessness. So if you're living in a vehicle, that's unsheltered homelessness. If you're living in an encampment, that's unsheltered homelessness. But that's the distinction. And generally, when you see a trend of, even if the number of homelessness is staying the same, that total number, but if the move is towards more sheltered homelessness, that's considered sort of the first positive step in the right direction. Is that if you're seeing more individuals, couples, and families moving towards sheltered homelessness, that means they're receiving services, getting their documents in order, getting their health in order, maybe vocational training, all those things that are leading towards, stability and permanent housing. And that's sort of the ultimate goal. Councilmember Stevenson, you had asked about, remind me.
90-day.
Yes. Okay. So something that's useful to know about that is, in Millbrae, as we've discussed, oftentimes people are exiting BART and they don't know that they're in Millbrae. And one of the primary questions that's asked when our outreach workers are assessing folks is, where did you come from? You're in Millbrae, you've just been asked to exit BART. Kind of what's your plan? And oftentimes, if we find that the last known residence of an individual is Contra Costa County, and that's where their last residence was, we will figure out a way to get to that person back to Contra Costa County to receive services. So and that's counted as an intervention. And so because of the structure of service delivery in the state of California, it's county based. So that's part of that process. And it is challenging, I think, and uniquely challenging because of BART that we see a lot of clients come in who are from elsewhere in the Bay Area, and kind of making that match happen is important. And, I would say if you do end up doing some kind of a unique assessment of or a different point in time count, that might be a question to ask people is where was your last known residence, and thinking about connecting them to the right county for the services that they deserve.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to answer any questions as an operator. And I'll also just add that we work very closely with the 2 outreach workers in the city of San Mateo who are contracted with the police, or who work with SMPD. And I'll also just add that we run a permanent supportive housing location in downtown San Mateo that was really the brainchild of a law enforcement officer who saw the same dozen or so chronically homeless people in downtown San Mateo over and over again, and said, it's ridiculous that we're continuing to arrest these folks and manage them in ways that feel like, really it shouldn't be on law enforcement. And sort of before the time of hotel conversions, we did a hotel conversion in downtown San Mateo. That's the Vendome. And I would say that staff and council, you're welcome to tour the Vendome. We also run a family site in northern San Mateo, just on the border between Burlingame and San Mateo. And if you haven't been to the Navigation Center, we welcome you there as well. Vice Mayor Colson, it looks like you've got a question.
Yes, thank you very much. So when people enter, especially a very large facility like the Navigation Center, are they segregated at all by people who we know are using, people who are not using, seniors, people with special needs or certain special abilities?
So a few things. The Navigation Center is designed in a very particular way. And in the central portion of the campus, there are rooms that do not have attached bathrooms. So they're still private rooms. There's a desk, a closet, a bed, but residents would have to exit their room to go to the restroom. Those tend to be used for clients where we're concerned about kind of socializing the space, their physical needs, their emotional needs, things like that. And so sometimes those rooms are utilized for clients that may be more vulnerable, to make sure that staff is able to check on them more regularly because they're more frequently leaving their room. The rest of the rooms have an in-suite bathroom. So we do think about the needs of clients in the spacing, but it is based on the housing first model, which is to say that if a client is using or drinking in the privacy of their room and they're not behaving untoward towards staff or other clients, that is allowed. However, if a client is using and it is causing disruptive behavior in some way, they're being physically violent, they're threatening, they're a harm to themselves, there is a specific intervention that would happen. If they're being violent towards someone, they're discharged from the program. And that's something that's very clear from the beginning when they enter. I'll also say, if a client comes to their case manager or to any staff and says, this is, I need substance use treatment, we will do our very best to find them inpatient treatment if that's what's right, and hold their place for them at the site. The other thing I'll say is, the Navigation Center and other sites like it are really meant to try to acclimate clients to what it would be like to live independently in an apartment building. And the reality is, for any of us, when we go home, our neighbor could be doing whatever they want. And as long as it's not harming us, it's sort of an acceptable thing. And so kind of managing that is part of the experience of living at the Navigation Center. We certainly work with clients to make them all feel safe and comforted, but that again, it goes back to the housing first model.
But from a sort of trends point of view, do you think that, I mean, I know we do the counts and I'm glad we have some data. It always feels a little arbitrary and there's always the sense that we're going to miss people. Your sense from a day-to-day or year-to-year basis, do you think homelessness in the county and then in central part of the county is stable, it's growing, it's diminishing in it as a phenomenon?
I think it's really hard to say. In all likelihood, the homelessness here, similar to the other cities in central San Mateo County, people are able to sort of hide their homelessness, whether it's through living in a car or in an RV or in an encampment in an area sort of off the beaten path. It does make it very challenging to find people. And, my colleague Lynette can speak more to what that looks like. But oftentimes, if an unhoused person is, sort of going unseen, we don't really know where they are.
Yeah, fair enough. And just to affirm, at the moment, as reported by Mr. Kirschner, Life Moves believes you have adequate staff to handle the volume of calls you get from the city of Burlingame.
Yeah, I would just add, I think everything in the staff report was correct. The only thing I would add is that, there have been moments, I think, where the response time has not been as ideal from the perspective of the city. And certainly if there was dedicated time to Burlingame, that could change. But certainly that would be something to think about, in a further study session.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Any other
Any-
questions in this fields? Thank you so much. I don't normally call people out, but would Ms. Wolin like to come and tell us a little bit about the genesis of the program? And does the county see this being sustained beyond June of 24?
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the council. My name is Linda Wolin. I'm Chief of Staff to Supervisor Dave Pine, who proudly represents Burlingame as part of his county supervisorial duties. First, if I may, just to clarify a couple things, the 90-day policy is a bit new for the county. It is a county policy, so Life Moves is, by being funded by the county, is implementing the policy. And it came about in part since the Navigation Center has been opened, because it's such kind of a bright, shiny, new and awesome opportunity for many individuals. Word got around, and we have seen some people coming to San Mateo County specifically to try to access the Navigation Center and some of the other resources we have here. So one has to prioritize where we're going to devote services, and the county staff has made a decision that for the near term to prioritize county resources for county residents. So it's really tough because many of the individuals we may meet, and I'm sure Lynette does too, may be residents or have connections here or have family here and are here for a reason and are having trouble proving it because you might not have a utility bill or other pieces of paper that would support your residency. So I think staff does a good job, and maybe Lynette can speak to exactly how that works, but how you would prove your residency. So this is a bit iterative, and we're figuring out how this is going to work. But for right now, that's the county policy on 90 days. Just another quick word about the what we're calling mental health pilots for the police response. It's a co-response. I think the chief spoke to the 4 communities that have it now. There's also there's a bit 2 different models running at the same time, those that were mentioned, and then also Half Moon Bay has a different type of model. And the Board of Supervisors will be doing a study session to look at the different models and the pros and cons of different things and some other options. I believe that will be scheduled in early December, but I'm certainly can get back to Lisa about when that is and let you all know. That should be an in-depth look at those models and kind of what's working, what's not working. They were both pilots. And then lastly, I wanted to just mention that all of the responses we have for individuals experiencing homelessness are kind of on a continuum. And I think you have the HOT team is kind of the beginning of the continuum, and the end would be to have permanent housing for everyone, right? So we've been working really hard on the sort of initial side of that. So that's HOT team response, having access to a shelter, That could be the congregate shelter or the navigation center, but then there's interim housing, and of course, there's permanent supportive housing too. So for some, like Ms. Fields was speaking to, who may be the hidden homeless, maybe they can go right into independent living, but there are many individuals, and particularly ones who may be facing addiction or other challenges, who may need more supports even as they find permanent housing. So this is a really important part of the strategy, and you may have seen that thanks to Home Key Opportunities, the county is looking to purchase additional hotels for permanent. We have a few, we would like to have more. That is to relieve the front end of the continuum to start moving people to a more permanent spot. If we don't have the permanent supportive housing on the other end, the navigation center will be great for some individuals, but you sort of never graduate if we can't find permanent housing. So I just want to keep that in mind, because we're talking about today a lot of the very first contact and not about the end. Then back to Mayor's question. The Millbrae pilot was originally the very first one that Mr. Kirshner spoke to, was a combination. He consolidated the county contribution. It was in part Supervisor Pine's district discretionary funds, some human service agency funds, and City of Millbrae funds. The current program, as was stated, only goes through June of 2024. I believe the city is seeking to find state grants for that. I think those state grants are in very high demand, and I think it's TBD as to whether that will be successful. I don't think we have unlimited resources to continue to support that in the way that we have. So I think the county and city are working together to try to identify alternative resources to continue that program. Did that answer your question?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, thank you very much.
Is there anything?
You want to leave a few minutes from colleagues to sort of try to sum up where we are and what we've heard. But I will invite any other quick comments from anybody who'd like to comment. Okay, well, thank you very much, all of you, for being here and sharing your time. I am gonna throw it to colleagues. This is meant to be a study and think about kind of session, not necessarily a let's get up and do something, but with the input that we've had, I welcome thoughts from colleagues. Really, you want to get us started, Mr. Ortiz?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first thing that comes to mind, and I keep thinking about the success that Millbrae is having. So first thing that comes to mind is we need to work together with Millbrae, because there really are no borders to this problem. And I think that we do share a problem in our north end, in our border with Millbrae, because of the BART station. And so I think it's kind of a natural that we should reach out and try to figure out how to work together. And that was part of why I was asking about the counts and who was doing them, because I don't think we should have our own people. We should have the same group doing the count for Millbrae, Burlingame, because again, I think you're going to count the same people crossing Murchison. And I think that goes for all the other programs. I think we need to figure out creative ways to work with the county and creative ways to work with our neighbors, so that we are not, the thought of creating our own 2 FTEs to address the problem doesn't seem right. I think that we should share these services with other cities and look to ways to do it without adding a lot of headcount to the city. That's my thought. Thanks.
Thank you for that. I'd like to go next. Yes, Councilwoman Beach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for bringing this, and for all the experts in the room. Very, very powerful discussion, important one. I did participate in the 2019 homeless count, and I work in the nonprofit world that's sort of down the food chain, sort of part of that whole wraparound supportive services. Number of our clients experience homelessness, so I'm bringing kind of that perspective. I really appreciate Terry's comment tonight, is what problem are we trying to solve? I think that's one of the most important questions we need to ask ourselves. Is this really about people who we see on the street that we are concerned are unsheltered and we want to resolve that problem? Or are we willing to really dig deeper, peel back the onion, and ask ourselves, how many people do we have experiencing homelessness in our community? And if we're going to ask ourselves that question, which I think we really do, I would like to see us really invest in answering that question. Then we need to partner with the Burlingame School District. We need to partner with the San Mateo Union High School District. We need to ask We need to really look on our bayfront very seriously, because I think it's very easy to think we may have 9 or so people in Burlingame, but there's a lot of people probably living in their automobiles. What Ms. Fields mentioned, they're hidden and purposely. I had a friend living in a storage shelter in Burlingame, literally. They're living in cars. We need to figure out, if we're trying to solve that problem, then we might allocate our limited resources differently and even more powerfully for the problem we're trying to solve in Burlingame. So I think that's an important first question, because we do have students experiencing homelessness in our school districts as well, both the Union High School and our elementary school district. I do like the idea of learning more about the impact of the mental health pilot. And so I think I'd be keenly interested in watching that study session. I think we should all watch it pretty carefully. I think that's an interesting place to put resources. Like Councilmember Ortiz, I do not think it is a good idea to have a dedicated person who is on the Burlingame staff who would be a liaison, because we need the experts in the room, like Life Moves, who have those connections to wraparound supportive services that are coordinating with the county. And so I think if we're going to invest in more resources, it should be through the agencies that do it best. And I do think we need to embrace permanent supportive housing here in Burlingame. Maybe that's some of our housing impact fees as we look at converting naturally affordable housing, but not just low income, but maybe that has wraparound supportive services and partner with the county and figure out ways to do that. Because that's ultimately, it's those wraparound supportive services that give people the leg up to get their lives back going. And I think maybe I will just pause there, but I do think we have a bigger problem on our bayfront than probably we recognize. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Mr. Stevenson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I would echo both Councilmember Beach and Ortiz's comments. I believe that we're underestimating the actual head count and numbers and what segments those actually impact. I think about return on investment, whether you hire staff in the city to handle and drive some of this, or you leverage the experts in the room and drive funding. I think we need to reconsider what level of funding we are doing to some of these groups that are actually on the front lines dealing with this day in, day out, and know that. So I would advocate relooking at what levels. I know we do the allocations on an annual basis, but maybe that's not significant enough to really have an impact. And then I think the question is, and there are cities out there that have dramatically improved their homeless situation. They'll kind of question some of the data that they use, but the reality is this is not a short-term problem. This is decades to address, in my view, and that we need to look at models that are working in other cities, other countries that are really addressing this. I think there's no one silver bullet to this challenge. I think it's really a collective fabric that we have to apply across all of these different dimensions, and the city has to play a part in that.
Thank you. Madam Vice Mayor.
Thank you. So I think, just recognizing the hour, I'm going to be brief. First step, I think is a very good first step for to solve a complex group of problems. I think there's more than one single problem we're talking about here. And this is a good step. And Mr. Kirshner, I really want to thank you and appreciate the work you've done. I had the opportunity to work over the last few months with Terry on Michael's situation. I want to thank you, Michael, for coming tonight. I appreciate it. And it was beyond frustrating. And I'm a person who actually knows how to kind of work the system. So the system is broken. There are problems in it, and we do need to, before we invest in it, I want to make sure we're investing in pieces that are going to have efficacy. And then just, I think for me, given we've had a lot of commentary on the top 4 or 5, I really want to focus on the work that the HOPE committee did with regard to housing and the urgency with which we were directed to preserve housing and keep people from becoming unhoused. So I think that is an area where we can almost immediately focus. And we're going to hear more about the BAFA funding, which is not just to build housing, but it's really targeted to build affordable housing. And while market rate housing developers may stop building in the next 5 years because of the costs, we will need state funding to address that interim housing position. And I think in Burlingame, given the number of multifamily residential apartments and the renters we have, our biggest impact can be to make sure that that 60% going to almost 70% of our population remains housed. So I hope we can focus on that end of the spectrum as well in this complex discussion.
Thank you very much. And again, in light of the hour, I'll also be relatively brief. I want to thank our experts, our NGO friends, as I used to say in the Foreign Service. So thank you all for being here. I would suggest that you think about what more we can do because it is a council that has capacity and interest and takes the issue seriously. And we're looking for ways that we can make a difference. So we may not have all the ideas in those 6 categories. There's a 7th or an 8th. So we're open to ideas. I think Mr. Stevenson's comment about maybe we do more in the next cycle on our charitable giving is a very important observation. I also think Mr. Ortiz's comment about partnering with Millbrae is important. That deadline will come up soon, and I think we should partner together to try to keep that program going because that's clearly working and it's clearly something that affects both of our cities. And I think I'll leave it there. Yes, Councilmember Beach.
I really apologize. I just want to echo the Vice Mayor's comment about helping our residents from falling into homelessness. And I think maybe another thing we could consider in future is a discussion about resurrecting the Burlingame Rental Assistance Program that we did through Samaritan House, because it really, I see it every day. $1,000 can be the difference maker between keeping a family housed and unhoused and not even allowing it get to the point where people are living in their car. And I think that's a really important thing for us it's come up a number of times, even in our HOPE discussion, but I hope we'll consider that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Again, I'm going to draw it to a close just because we have a regular agenda to handle, but thank you all very much for being here and for all the work that you guys are doing. And congratulations for the folks that you've helped put a roof over their head and give them a chance to have a second chance. So thank you all very much. I'm going to close the study.
Just take 2 minutes to let people.
Take a minute?
Yeah.
Okay, so with apologies, because we ran just a little bit late on the topic of homelessness, it is a big issue. We're going to just take a 2-minute break and then we'll group in at about 7:05. Thank you.
What?
You done?
Yes, please. Thank you.
I signed that, right?
Yeah.
Second one.
No, just the one. Are you gonna?
I'm just. I'm gonna leave right to that one. I'm gonna go.
Okay, that's fine.
A minute. Oh, yeah, of course.
I know it's all you guys. I know that. Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, I tried to say.
Whatever the city provided.
They'll be like, well, what exactly did it look like? Looks like that. And that's really cool. How are you?
Is it me or am I just freezing? Huh? I'm getting sick or something. Am I missing something? There's no smoking in the agenda, is it? We keep one. We have a team. I'm sort of got a completely missed the opportunity. I can see all the.
Hi, thank you for your work so much.
Gonna gavel, get people back.
Gavel.
No, I think.
All right.
Emily?
Uh-oh.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we should.
Jeremy did a really good job.
He did a really, really good job.
Plus he said he was nervous.
Good. He had a really good presence.
Yeah, totally.
That was a dinner party.
I was able to wolf down.
Let's go, Michael.
I'm still trying it. It seems like it's growing.
Okay.
We got
Guys
everyone.
ready?
Thank you. Thank you for that break. I got a little dinner.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You guys,
Yeah,
we get
Can I put it there without picking it?
I was like,
all right, all right, all right.
got it. We get everyone to sit down.
You all are having way too much fun.
it's the firefighters.
We're gonna get it.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Welcome belatedly to the November 6th Burlingame City Council. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. There's a lot of stuff. We are going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance as we always do, and we are going to ask our Fire Chief Bruce Barron to lead us in the pledge.
Tired. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. If we could do the roll call, please.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Here.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Here.
Councilmember Beach.
Here.
Vice Mayor Coulson,
Here.
Mayor Brownrigg.
Here. Now, we will move with dispatch through the agenda, but I did want to say one thing, and we tried our best to make it clear. But there is an item later this evening that has to do with smoking. That item is going to consider whether the Broadway ban on public smoking in public space should be extended to Burlingame Avenue. Tonight is not the night that we are talking about flavored tobacco bans or hookah. So if you are here because you thought perfectly reasonably that it's a smoking item, it's probably about hookah, then you should comment in public comment because it's an agendized item. Or you can rejoin us in, I think, 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, when we will consider specifically the question of flavored tobacco, changing, amending, whatever the flavored tobacco ban, and the question of hookah lounges. So I just wanted to say that because it may be that people are here expecting And certainly if you want to say something about hookah, you should not wait till item, 12 or whatever it is. You should speak in public comment in just a few minutes. So I just wanted to lay that out for everybody. We did try to make it clear, but it's awfully difficult. It's confusing. So with that caveat, and nobody's feelings will be hurt if anybody leaves. We have no request for remote participation, so that takes us to a
Oh, we did, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
report out from closed session. There was no closed session. There was a very good open session on homelessness, and thank you to all of our experts and colleagues for a good conversation. That takes us to upcoming events. And there are a number of public events that I want to draw people's attention to, and some of them we will be talking about in a minute as well. In honor, there's a couple of different items in honor of Veterans Day, but in particular, on Wednesday, November 8th from 4:30 to 6:30 at our library, there's going to be a session, Veterans Day, honoring the past and present. And this will be a panel of veterans from different branches discussing their military service. It will feature our own local veterans, Roger Krakow, and our fellow council colleague, Emily Beach, as well as additional speakers, including a vet from the Vietnam War and someone in some of our more recent conflicts. And so we welcome the members of the public to hear the stories and talk about this important branch of public service. And thank you to the Burlingame Library Foundation for making this possible, along with a number of other veterans agencies from around the county and the region. On November 15th, in our United Against Hate Week, on which we will have a proclamation in a few minutes at 7 p.m. in the city of Burlingame, and the library will be celebrating United Against Hate Week with a virtual meeting with author Savala Nolan, the author of Don't Let It Get You Down, Essays on Race, Gender, and the Body. She's a professor at Henderson Center of Social Justice at Berkeley, and a very engaging speaker and well worth listening to. So please, you can go online and find information about that November 15th at 7 p.m. And then finally, in our United Against Hate Week series for kids that we're trying to talk to, November 6th through the 16th, we are going to, a series will feature middle school author Christine Day and children's author Ali Kamanda, whose stories promote inclusive and equitable communities. And they will also be virtual, but accessible to the general public through San Mateo County. And you can check our library website for more information. And then finally, on United Against Hate Story Walk in front of the library starting November 12th. So those are a number of other items. We will also be presenting certificates to a number of veterans on Friday at the Truesdale, some of our elder veterans. So those are some of the upcoming public events. Are there any other? Yes, please, Vice Mayor Coulson.
I just want to remind everyone that on right before the library event at 7 p.m., there will be a virtual meeting for traffic calming around for people living in the Occidental, Chapin, and Ralston area neighborhood, which is my neighborhood. And I believe you can find all the data and information on the website, and there were mailers sent out. So keep an eye out on your mail. You'll get a link there, but it's a really important event, and we all know how important it is to get feedback on these traffic changes that we might be considering.
Thank you for that heads up. Anything else? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on. And the first presentation is a bittersweet one because it is our proclamation recognizing our own Central County Fire Department Fire Chief, Bruce Barron. So Chief, would you join us at the podium? I'm going to, I'm not going to read, I never read proclamations because it's so boring. But I'm going to call out a few items, and then I would welcome my colleagues and our city manager, who's been the I forget what the title is, but the head of
Administrative officer.
Chief Administrative Officer of the Fire Board several times, many times. And so all of us, or many of us, have had the chance to work very closely with Chief Barron for a number of years. So in brief, in 1991, Chief Barron started his fire service career here in Burlingame, having graduated from the Stanford paramedic program. I'm sorry, the paramedic program came afterwards in 94. But anyway, 91 started his career. He has been at Central County Fire since before it was Central County Fire, when it was just Burlingame Fire. And I said at a different event, what a tremendous achievement it was to merge two departments and now three effectively. But that's never easy. It's never easy in any setting to merge different organizations with different cultures and different hierarchies and everything else. And I think Central County is a model of public service and have generated terrific value to the people of Burlingame and Hillsborough and now Millbrae. And you were a big part of that management team that helped grow the spirit of moving from big red trucks with city names into big red trucks with Central County Fire representing the entire board. So I really, really appreciate that. Made fire captain in 2002, battalion chief in 2013, and finally fire chief in 2019. Chief Barron was also deployed to the towers during 9/11, and thank you for your service there, which was highly dangerous at a moment of real peril for the country, and then has received numerous awards throughout his career, and really has led an exceptional department. And we thank the men and women who are here tonight and the many, many men and women who are not here tonight who serve all of our cities so well, so heroically, and so diligently under your leadership and under their own public service and drive to be great public servants. So after 32 years, we are finally releasing you back into the wild. We hope you survive and look forward to hearing more from you in a minute, but I'd love to welcome my colleague's remarks. Councilmember Stevenson, who's on the fire board.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief Barron, just albeit only 1 year, not even 1 year being on Central County, I've come to learn the tremendous respect and impact that you've brought not only to our Central County Fire Department and how well it has been run in the sense of the achievements. I know we just did a study from an outside consulting firm that rated the whole department on a lot of different factors, and the achievement of a level 2, given the scale of Central County Fire, is quite a testament to not only you, but your entire team. 32 years, that's tremendous. And I think I've had the benefit of living in Burlingame for about the same amount of time. And my family has relied upon the service that you and your colleagues bring, oftentimes not in the greatest of circumstances. So I just, tremendous, tremendous respect for what you have done, not only in your career, but also for the cities of Burlingame and Hillsborough and now Millbrae. So congratulations, well-earned retirement. We wish you well. Don't go too far away. Stay in the loop.
Thank you. Councilmember Ortiz, our other fire director.
Chief, what a ride. 32 years. Thank you so much for your service, for your leadership in the last few years. It's been a real honor working with you as a member of the fire board, and you've done great work, and you're going to be missed. And yet, like Councilmember Stevenson said, please don't be a stranger. Keep in touch with us. We'd love to see you around. So thank you. Good luck with everything. Thank you for everything you did. It's been really an honor.
Thank you, Ricardo.
Councilmember Coulson.
Thank you. Yes, Chief, I really want to thank you for your years of service. The fire department, although I have not served on the board, has always been very important to me, because my grandmother died in a fire. And so I really appreciate how the life-saving tactics that you deploy and the people and the bravery that you have and what that means to families. So to you and all the brave people that work with you, men and women. I want to thank them and thank you for the years of service. And I look forward to seeing what you're going to do in the near term. Take care.
Thank you, Donna.
Councilmember Beach.
Thank you, Chief. Thanks for your amazing service. I echo comments of colleagues. We have absolutely the best staff of any city. The 200 people who work for the city of Burlingame are amazing. And, you know, being a little bit on the inside the last 8 years, all those of us who have the privilege to sit up here, we really understand what it takes to run a city. Having said that, the public safety officers, whether it's our police force and our fire department, it takes a very different kind of a human being to be willing to run into a burning building or to be the first paramedic on the scene of a really awful accident. And we have those, and or to run up a building that's falling down in New York City. So I just want to thank you for your courage and for your leadership of the women and men who are willing to do those tasks and to hold the team together and continue to provide great service here in Burlingame. So thank you for your leadership and your selfless service for many years.
Thank you.
And
Absolutely.
before I hand it over to you, I do want to allow our city manager, who knows her way around city teams pretty well.
I do. Thank you, Mayor Brownrigg. Bruce, I just wanted to say thank you. I got to know you a little bit when you were in training, and then I had the pleasure of working with you when you were promoted to deputy, and then I had the pleasure of promoting you and making you our fire chief in 2019. And we went through a lot of crazy times early in the pandemic, trying to figure out how we were going to keep the city running. We were together during wildfires, floods. I mean, it was like the apocalypse at times, and you kept a steady hand on the department. And even while all that crazy was going on, you managed to get the standards of cover study done, which was a huge, heavy lift, and so appreciated all the work that you did and getting that consultant to turn his drafts in and turn them in again and fix the issues and get something that we can use to figure out where the department's going to go in the future. And that's really a testament to you and your leadership of the department. So I just wanted to really thank you for everything you did for Burlingame. My colleagues in Hillsborough and Millbrae aren't here right now, but I know that they share my thanks. And I think you've already made the rounds to those cities. And we'll be chatting with you at the fire board on Wednesday. And finally, I wanted to thank your wife who's taking pictures and your daughters. I think one of your daughters is here. They sacrifice a lot too when you do a job in public safety. And there were lots of nights and weekends that you weren't home and lots of important events in their lives that I'm sure you were at a firehouse or, you know, off on a wildland adventure, you know, fighting a fire somewhere far, far away for days on end. And so I thank you so much to your family for lending you to us for 32 years. And I know your wife has a honey-do list for you, so I'm sure you'll be busy for a while. And I know that they'll be happy to have you around more, and I wish you all the best in your retirement. It's been a pleasure working with you. Thanks.
Thank you.
So Chief, it's over to you.
I would just like to thank the council for all the kind words. I can't tell you how it's been an honor and a privilege to serve Central County, but I was hired in Burlingame, so my heart's with Burlingame. So really appreciate. I said when I got hired here in Burlingame, I was going to retire from Burlingame. So one of my commitments came true. I'm not sure I'm retired. I know my wife's retired because now all of a sudden I take the kids to school, I pick them up, I do all those things, but I'm not complaining. It's been all great. And a few more people to thank. Burlingame department heads, always supportive. Anything you needed, you just picked up the phone and called and it was done. I just can't. Lisa, you put together a fantastic team. And then of course, for all the crews that took their time out of their busy night, I know they just came in from an auto accident. So I appreciate them coming in to support me. But again, you can't do all this by yourself. And I think most of you know that. And it's the men and women behind me that basically made everything happen. So thank you. Oh, one more. I'd like to thank my wife. I can't forget that. My wife and my one daughter had a soccer practice, so that's pretty important. She had to be there. It's tryouts. And then grandma, she came. And then my cousin he's visiting from Canada. He just happened to be here, so we made him come. So thank you all for being here.
I am going to invite anyone else, but just please join me in welcoming I am going to let anybody else say a word if they'd like to. If not, we're then going to do a photo with the proclamation. So would anyone else like to have this is your last chance to do it officially and into a microphone. All right, seeing none, then let's do a photo.
Yep.
You can sit next to me. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks, man.
Ah. That is a lovely PS. Okay, well, it's all downhill from there. We do have on the agenda presentation of Veterans Day certificate. Actually, that presentation is going to happen at the Truesdale on Friday, so we'll pass that one. And that takes United Against Hate Week, a week that's always important to this city, but feels especially important this season. Is there a presentation or is it just the proclamation?
Proclamation.
Okay. Well, first of all, I do want to thank our librarian, Brad McCulley, for all of the work that he has done over the years to promote United Against Hate Week. And in fact, I think Brad looks at it, and I know we do, is it's not a week, it's a year, it's a permanent state of affairs. It sadly more than ever feels important. Having said that, I'm not going to read the United Against Hate Week, which does review the history of why this came to be, and kudos to the city of Berkeley for getting it started. Rather, I asked my colleagues to each spend a minute or two explaining why we feel that being united against hate is important, because I think it's more important to understand where we're coming from than where a piece of paper is coming from. And so in no particular order, I'm going to go from right to left. Councilmember Stevenson, would you
Sure.
give it started?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, the world's pretty divided in a lot of different ways. And yet I'm struck by the fact that some of the beauty of our world is really based on the diversity of our cultures, the diversity of our experiences, and yet something that divides us and pulls us further apart is just this rhetoric and I call it falling into the hate pattern, whether it's armed conflicts, whether it's speech, whether it's bullying at the schools, whether it's unconscious or conscious bias. It's something that we have to figure out how we become a city and a culture of supporting kind of the alternative view. And I think there's lots of opportunities that you can do locally, whether it's at the school context, whether it's in the city context, whether it's at your place of work. And I would just encourage all of us to, you know, it's easy to fall into hate speech. It's easy to fall into frustration about something, but that's not the answer. The answer is figuring out how we come together. So that's
Thank
what I.
Thank you. Well said. Councilmember Beach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm struck by how you've started. It seems especially important this year. Sad thing is, every year since Vice Mayor Colson brought it to the city back in 2019, 5 years going, every year it feels especially important. And I think the reason it's important that we call it out and that we have Burlingame United Against Hate is because it gives people an opportunity to put a sign in their window, to come to the library and have an intellectual conversations for children to think about what it means to be an inclusive society. We've gotten pushback on that. Some people write in and call it woke. That it's not okay. It's just, why are we doing this? What's the point? It's because we want a community dialogue and we want to put it at the forefront every day, but at least 1 week a year, we can make it a priority for the city. And I think it's very important that we continue doing it. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Beach. Vice Mayor Colson.
Thank you. So I've had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with children over the past few months. And what I've learned about being around, especially little children, is that the normal state of affair is friendship and and happiness. And so we adults must be teaching bigotry and hatred. And I'm sad about that. And I hope that we can all learn a lesson from the children in our lives, and especially the children that sacrifice so much in these horrible wars that we have to watch around the world, and know that the normal state of affairs is not hate. It's actually, I think, love and caring and kindness. And I really appreciate that in Burlingame, we have put a line in the sand and said, we are not going to step across it. We're going to represent inclusiveness. We're going to represent cultural diversity. We're going to represent and speak for everyone. I'm proud of that, and I'm proud of everything we're doing, from more housing to trying to figure out how to house our unhoused people like we did tonight. And I really want to thank and respect my colleagues for continuing to do this year in, year out under every single mayor. It's unusual, I think, that councils can stand so united against one thing, and this is something I am proud of.
Thank you. Mayor, Mr. Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We live in a little diverse little bubble here in Burlingame. We often don't spend a lot of time thinking about where our neighbors are from or who our kids are hanging out with, what their religion. As an immigrant, I've always felt very welcome in Burlingame. And so we lose sight of what happens outside of our little bubble sometimes. And right now, when we get things that happen outside of our bubble that impact our world here, and that we see things happening with our neighbors, with our people that we know, that's when it really hits home how lucky we are to live where we do, and how tolerant and what a great place this is. And but we have to be vigilant, because that's not by mistake, and we have to keep track of those things that cause strain, and work through them, and reach out to our neighbors when things like these happen, and just remember that some people are going through a really tough time right now. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Ortiz. Thank you to my colleagues for those comments, which I think mean so much more than a written piece of paper. I'll just add my own 2 thoughts. I'm going to speak briefly on a national basis and on a local basis. So on a national basis, I think our country is special. I think it's special because we welcome people from all over the world. And we ask all that you do is you come and you work hard and you treat people fairly and you leave your biases behind. And that's the community that we're building here. And really, and I speak as somebody who's lived around the world, there is no other country in the world who has that point of view. None. That's why this country is special, and that's why we can't let it go. That's the national point. On a local point, what does it mean? It means when this council is invited, or our library is invited, to show up and talk about how we're going to stick together, and we're not going to let the bullies win and the haters win. That means when we're asked to come to the temple, we go to the temple. If we're asked to go to the church, we go to the church. If we're asked to go to the mosque, we go to the mosque. If we're asked to go to the library, Brad, we go to the library. because you can't say this often enough. And we all have to have each other's backs. And I think that's what this United Against Hate Week means. And so that's why we're working on it. But as Councilmember Beach points out, it isn't a one-time thing. It's an all-time thing. So that's it from City Council. I will happily open this up to anybody who'd like to speak on the issue. I have to call a friend out. Ms. Fields wrote a wonderful letter a couple weeks back, well worth reading if you missed it in the Daily Journal. Anyway, seeing no others, I won't beat this to death, but it is a really important issue, and I really appreciate my colleagues' heartfelt comments, which I think hit home. Okay, that takes us from the sublime to the pedestrian, the general plan safety element update briefing. Only in government can you go from high rhetoric to the general plan safety element.
Right, I was going to say that that's tough to follow up on those proclamations this evening, but I'm glad I'm here this evening. Good evening, Mayor Brownrigg and council members. My name is Ruben Hurin, and I'm the planning manager for the city of Burlingame. And the purpose of this presentation, I'll try to make it brief, is to introduce Burlingame's update of the safety element. This is an update of the existing safety element that was part of the 2019 general plan update. The update is part of the multi-jurisdictional safety element collaborative project. We are working on trying to come up with a better name, catchier name for that, which is a partnership of the County of San Mateo and also several cities, including Atherton, Belmont, Brisbane, Burlingame, East Palo Alto, Half Moon Bay, Pacifica, and San Bruno. Next slide. So this evening, I'll just give a brief overview of the project. We'll go through the project schedule, community engagement, and then just our next steps. This just kicked off recently, so this presentation is meant to be informational really tonight, but if you have any feedback, we welcome that at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. So staff working on the safety element update includes myself and Brittany Shao, the assistant planner. We also have formed a technical advisory committee, which includes representatives from police, fire, emergency services, parks, public works, sustainability, and also legal. This presentation was also given to the Planning Commission. The project team is being led by a firm called Community Planning Collaborative, and they'll act as the overall project manager, and they'll provide the communication and coordination between the participating agencies. PlaceWorks is the consultant team that's going to provide the technical assistance, and they'll also provide the community engagement portion of the project. And they are supported by 3 firms, including Climate Resilient Communities, Atlas Planning, and Nexus Planning and Research. Next slide. So what is a safety element? Safety element is one of the mandatory elements of the general plan, and it focuses on natural and human-caused hazards and the environment and the risks that they cause to our community. And the goal of the safety element is to protect the community, including our residents, our businesses, infrastructure, and the environment from natural disasters and other hazards. Next slide. So why is it important to update the safety element? First, we need to update the existing background information with new science and mapping that's available. We'll want to update the policies to address any new or ongoing hazards that come out of the community engagement within the community. We'll also want to improve and maintain consistency with other general plan elements and other agency plans, such as the local hazard mitigation plan. Some of you may be familiar with that. That's a plan that's more detailed short-term plan that looks at specific actions. As we know, grant funding is important, so the update would improve our eligibility for grant funding to implement resiliency and hazard mitigation projects. And lastly, it's to comply with some recent state regulations. In your staff report, I've listed a couple of those state regulations. So maybe we can skip the next slide, Megan. Yeah, we just skip that one. One of the state regulations, though, does require us to prepare a vulnerability assessment. And this assessment is a key analysis component of the safety element process. So it evaluates how climate-related hazards may affect people and community assets, such as our infrastructure and our buildings. It assesses the availability of existing policies, programs, and resources to help people prepare for, respond to, and recover from impacts. It also provides a prioritized list of vulnerabilities to inform the resilience policies and implementation measures. And it also reviews expected local impacts of climate change. So some of these at the bottom of the slide could affect Burlingame, for example, increases in intense rainfall and drought conditions, which we experienced last winter in terms of rainfall, more frequent extreme heat events, more frequent and intense regional wildfires, and sea level rise and shoreline flooding. And I would note that the consultant team is already working with One Shoreline and getting a lot of data from them for this project.
Mr. Hearn, may I ask that you speak a little closer to the microphone?
Sure, yeah. I should be used to it from planning commission meetings, so. So in terms of, let's go to the next slide, please. In terms of project schedule, the project will take approximately 2 years, and that's going to include community engagement as part of that process. The first step of the project includes compiling background information on hazards, including updating mapping, describing occurrences of past events, but also looking at what may change in the future. The next step is conducting the vulnerability assessment. Third step includes drafting goals, policies, and programs. And then we'll take all of that information and prepare a draft element for public review. Then it goes through an environmental review process, public hearings, and then hopefully approval hearings to adopt the safety element. So the safety element update is expected to wrap up in June of 2025. Next slide. As I mentioned, community engagement is important and will occur throughout the entire project. The goal is to inform the background information and also the vulnerability assessment, as well as the goals, policies, and implementation programs. The collaborative is taking an equity-focused approach just to make sure that we're reaching out to everyone in the community and we're hearing back regarding hazards and the needs of the community. So that community engagement will involve several activities you can see on the slide here. They'll be holding community workshops, several hard-to-reach community meetings, stakeholder meetings. There will also be a survey for those that can't attend meetings or workshops, so we want to make sure we try to reach everybody here. And then there will be several study sessions with the Planning Commission and City Council just to provide you with updates along the way. And lastly, public hearings to adopt the safety element. Next slide, please. The next immediate steps will be to compile data on hazards, populations, and community assets. And we've already been working with providing that data to the consultant team, create a GIS database, and then begin preparing that vulnerability assessment. So that concludes my presentation this evening. If you have any feedback, we'd be happy to take those now and continue working on the project.
Thank you very much. Are there questions or comments for Mr. Hearn? The only two small things I would say is one, I assume, but please make sure that the Burlingame Neighborhood Network is part of the outreach. They obviously think a lot about natural disasters and how, and it's a little hard to tell, at least for me, how much of this is about the built environment and how much is about policy, right? They don't control the built environment, but they do have, I think, important insights on policy. So one, and then, this is really small, but over the years, we've had several requests when it gets very hot from senior citizens for a cooling center. And so I'd love to see this, if we're going to do this kind of work anyway, I'd love to see some analysis of a cooling center, especially as heat waves are expected to get worse.
Sure.
So
yeah, and I do remember reading through some of the the information that we'll be looking at, cooling centers was definitely on there. So
Great.
we'll make note of that, make sure we cover that.
Great, thank you very much. Councilmember Beach.
Thank you for the presentation and your work on this. Does this interplay at all with ever with like traffic safety, our Vision Zero subcommittee and things like that? Or is this really something that's an entirely separate issue?
Sure. No, I think we'll probably be looking at that when we talk about consistency with other general plan elements. So when we're looking at mobility and those issues. So I think there will be some overlap there.
Where primarily people are getting injured and dying or getting hurt. Yeah.
Right. So we've requested and we received already data from the police division and
Right.
fire. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have a point?
One, yes, just one comment, which is we just finished our age-friendly city. I just am reminded. And so making sure that we're linking this back into our age-friendly city. If there's anything we need to revise in that document, it's a living document and we can do it that from here.
Sure. Yeah, we'll take note of that too.
Thank you.
Real quick,
Yes, please, Councilmember.
just a clarification question in terms of the climate change impacts and what those actually include, or where's the line drawn? Like, for example, if it's just data based on average rainfall and temperature and things like that, that misses things like that are affected by that, whether it's flooding in the creeks, whether it's down trees, power line issues, these types of things. So what's this? I just want to understand the scope of where this plan starts and stops, so to speak.
So I think that we'll leave to our technical experts. We can certainly come back to you with that information because we just kicked off the project. We haven't gotten quite into those details yet, but I was reviewing our current safety element and I believe the update will have a lot more detailed information in there because there's so much more information available now.
Thank you.
Terrific. I do need to see if there's any member of the public who would like to speak on the general plan safety element update briefing. Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Good luck on the work. I will just quickly point out for people who didn't read the staff report, we're sharing the expense with a number of other cities. It would feel crazy to me if the state asked every city to do this all by itself. It'd be a terrible waste of resources, but we are sharing and it's a pretty reasonable amount. And therefore, I think we all feel more comfortable saying like, okay, this makes sense. So thank you. Okay, and then finally, our last presentation before we get to the rest of the agenda is on multi-jurisdictional electric bike sharing update.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and council members. Tonight I'll be sharing progress on our spin bike sharing program. Thanks, Megan. So, next slide. So just to share some of our stats. So as a reminder, we're doing this program with the city of Millbrae. It's launched in May, so it's been about 6 months. And we have about 200 bikes out in both of our cities at a time. So over the 6 months, over about 9,700 rides have been taken, 2,600 different users, and 11,000 miles have been ridden on the spin bikes. And we've been using all sorts of promos and programs to help promote it, from parking corrals, signage, free rides, $10 credits. We're experimenting with all sorts of ways to get the word out. Next slide. So one of the ways that we are also tracking information is we also have a contract with Populous. The information I gave you included a report in the staff report from Looker, which is provided by Spin, which gives ridership statistics, but we wanted a bit more information than that. So with Millbrae, we have a Populous dashboard that this is a snapshot of going much more in depth of the information that we can get. Cutting it up into daily, weekly, monthly rides. And next slide. And we also have heat maps. So this gives an idea of what the popular routes are in Burlingame. And immediately you could see that California and Carolyn and The Bay side is some of our more popular routes used with spin.
Where there are bike lanes.
Yes, they work. Next slide. And this gives you an idea of popular, where the bikes are parked. And on the side, it's hard to see from here, but it breaks it down even by numbers. And most of those are corrals at City Hall, the library, downtown Burlingame. Caltrain is our most popular parking destination. And these maps can be focused in more or wider to give a better view of it, but this is a snapshot. So there's a lot we can do with this to give an idea of where bikes are popular and how they're used. Next slide. So we did do a survey to find out what the public feels about these spin bikes. And I will say, just to give a history about complaints and usage of the bikes, in the beginning, I'd say in the first 3 months, we would get 1 or 2 complaints a week, mostly about people getting used to the bikes on the right of way. Sometimes the bikes were there for too long. Sometimes they blocked an entryway to a driveway. And now we get about 1 or 2 a month. So we really don't get too many complaints, and as soon as we do, I do think that spin is responsive to us as soon as we call it out. So out of 107 respondents, I think it's, I can't see it from here, but 80%, I think, have never ridden spin. So the survey didn't quite get to the people we'd hope to complete it, actual riders, so that they could share their experience. But this informs us that I need to do a better job about promotions and getting the word out and getting more people engaged in it. Our ridership is lower than we'd like it to be, and we expect it to continue to get lower in the winter months as the days are shorter and it gets colder. But we do want to continue promoting it. So, for example, 68% of respondents never heard of one of our promos. So that's a window of opportunity for us in spin to work on. And then on the slide, on the pie chart below, the big green one is people who just aren't interested in the program. But the one I'm more interested in is the 12% blue. 12% of people said the program's too expensive. So that's another opportunity where we could step in. We have a grant from the San Mateo County Transportation Authority of $200,000 for Burlingame, $200,000 for Millbrae, and we have been using that grant for subsidizing these free rides. We plan to do a lot more because we see we have the funding available and the ridership numbers can match that too. Just keep giving free rides because we all know we subsidize vehicles in all sorts of different ways, so we can subsidize bike riding as well, since we have this grant money for that purpose. Next slide. So just some next steps or news too. We did find out that Spin is now owned by Bird. Bird is primarily a scooter company. They have a scooter is in San Francisco, I think San Jose, and also Redwood City. And we haven't seen any difference. We have the same staff and so on, but it does give an idea just of the still evolution of these bike sharing programs. For example, since the beginning, Spin has also dealt with some staffing issues. They have found it hard in our contract. The intention was to hire 2 local staff, and that's been near impossible to do. And even in our 6 months, we've had some staff turnovers. So they're facing the same challenges that a lot of companies are facing. So they're responsive to us, but we keep pushing them to do more for us also. And as I mentioned, we're expecting lower ridership in winter, but we think that with our free rides, we could still balance it out. And we've asked Spin, what in their eyes, how do they see the program? Because I think ridership is low. It started out about 60 to 80 rides per day. Now we're about 40 to 30 rides per day. So they have responded that the way they see it is the program is part of their San Francisco program. We use the same warehouse, we use the same staff, we use the same technicians. So on their part, it's not actually additional investment per se. of a side program. So they're happy with our program. They see it as part of a bigger picture of expanding along the peninsula, and we're encouraging them to do that. We've both Millbrae and us are connecting them with San Bruno and San Mateo, because we think if there's more destinations for people to ride to, that the program could grow. So in their eyes, they're pleased with the program, but we never really know what can happen on their end. And then next, so we're experimenting with free rides, the expanding, and then the San Mateo County Transportation Authority grant opens up again. It's a 2-year cycle. So the next one opens up this spring. And by then we'll have a better idea if this program, how it's working, and if funding is really what's going to keep it going or not. And we probably plan to apply again. And the TA is also, I think, is getting prepared to promote micromobility also on the county level. So we'll see how it continues to work on the peninsula.
Thank you.
Thank you for an excellent overview. Any questions? Yes, Councilmember Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm curious because I know one of the things we tried to do with the incentives was to give people a little bit of a discount if they use the parking corrals. When you look at that map, what percentage of bikes are actually being left in a targeted destination corral versus not?
Yeah, most of them are being parked in the corral. When you see the numbers are much higher, and the way the GIS works is you could see every parking incident, and we made a circle around the parking corral, and it's not that accurate, but a lot are captured in those areas. But yes, they're still scattered, but that's part of also my plan is to look at more corral locations across Burlingame.
You also mentioned the cost.
Yes.
And I know we're subsidizing a lot, right, with the grants. But when I did the math, it's about $6.67 a ride on average, which is about $5.21 a mile. And so I just look at the economics of how much of an incentive is there for somebody to give up their car and start using a bike to get even to go to the BART station, for example, in Millbrae. And so I think it's very important that we look at the economics, because I think that's going to drive some of the behavior. I suspect a lot of the commuting I'd be interested in the time of day data, if there's something on that, because I think some of that might be just more casual transportation needs rather than actually repeated. When you look at the distribution of the frequency,
Yes.
how many of those people are just opportunistic for one night a week or one night occasionally, as opposed to really embracing it for a daily commute, for example. And then I definitely echo the need to look at it more broadly. I think this is a great experiment. And of course, Spin looks at it as they've got a lot of fixed costs. And so every bike ride that they add without raising the warehouse costs and things like that is just marginal revenue to them. But for us, we're looking through a different lens. And that, the way we can help is just one, tying the promotions to better ridership, and two is to really look at it as what was the impact on taking cars off the road. So that's my thoughts and comments.
Thank you for that. Any other comments or questions? Yes, Councilmember Beach.
Thanks for the comprehensive update. It's great to kind of get the data before we're deciding whether or not to keep it going or make it disappear. And it's really helpful. So thanks for your work on it. Couple of ideas, like anything, like target marketing can be really powerful. So I'd love to brainstorm maybe offline, or what are groups that might be really interested in this that maybe we're not reaching, and maybe there's community subgroups or organization. How can we engage the group formerly known as BPAC, but Walk Bike Burlingame, to help us reach some communities, whether that's maybe folks without automobiles, maybe folks who live in the hills that might really be interested in electric bikes. Could we somehow do a campaign with multi-unit residential apartments that maybe are kind of far away, far enough away that a bike ride might really help? Like along in your neck of the woods, along Rollins, could we do some flyering, some door to door, some community meetings in parks through organic groups? I just wonder if there's ways to do that. And then I'd be keenly interested in how could we, if we can get the attention of some groups, how can we do need-based, like can people self-verify, hey, I don't do this because I don't think the economics work for me. Well, here's a $50 credit on the spin on your account, and let's target it for people that say it's a need-based issue, and let's give them the opportunity. Maybe they don't have cars to try a spin bike. And so I think it would be great to take this time to really like see how we can tool it and really target it. You leveraging kind of the community relationship. So thanks. I'm super excited though.
Thank you, Councilmember Beach. Vice Mayor Coulson.
Thank you. So sort of leveraging on Councilwoman Beach's idea, I think if we could talk to the owners of the apartment buildings, and if someone was willing to spin without a car, I think a number of them have fewer parking spots than they do new, and the new ones are certainly able to comply with the new zoning requirements that don't require as many parking stalls. So I think maybe that would be a good way to target it, is look at the ones that have below market units that are far enough away, and people who choose not to have a car, then maybe that's how we, subsidize there. But I like that idea.
Councilmember Stevenson.
Yeah, sorry to double in here, but just kind of building off the last two comments by Councilmember Beach and Vice Mayor Coulson. The opportunity to look at this slightly different than on a per incident basis kind of model, which is the way it operates today, is, yeah, I want to use e-bikes, I'll go use it. But if we want people to be out of their cars, or they maybe don't have an automobile because of economics or whatever, how long does the actual battery life last between charges? And could there be maybe longer term contracts? In other words, I get this for a week, and I know I'm charging when I drop it off at BART or some other form of transportation, but when I come back to the house, I know it's going to be there in the morning so I can use it again. And sometimes that's kind of the thinking, I believe, that needs to get into the mindset of this, in a dense city like San Francisco, that's different. But in a community like Burlingame, where you're kind of maybe going to other cities for some level of work or vocation, I think we have to think about it a little bit differently.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm just going to quickly, so I think one of the reasons we wanted to do a check-in is at the very beginning of the program, there were more complaints, and I think we promised our community that we would pay attention. And I just want to do a quick gut check with colleagues. I feel that the number of concerns and complaints has dropped. Is that something that we all?
Yeah, I was actually, again, my comment was going to be if the number of complaints is the measure of the success of this program, then we're doing very well.
So I think that was one of the reasons for the check-in, and I'm delighted that the community has mostly embraced it. And I think the improvements that have been made in terms of making sure they get back to corrals and stuff, big help. So thank you for the work, and hope some of these ideas and others will help expand the program.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sorry, I do need to let members of the public, anybody like to comment on our bike sharing program? Seeing none, I'll close that. So now this takes us to public comment on non-agendized items. As I said at the very beginning of this meeting, if you're here because you'd like to speak about flavored tobacco and hookah, then now is the time to talk, because that item is not going to be discussed later. The smoking item that we're discussing later has to do with expanding no smoking ban to Burlingame Avenue. We will come back in 2 weeks and talk about hookah specifically and flavored tobacco and all of that, and the county permit program. So we are going to speak about that in 2 weeks on the agenda. Tonight, if that's why you're here, you should speak now. And if you are going to speak, you're welcome. I would just ask you to keep it reasonably brief, because we're going to have a whole session on this in 2 weeks. So with that as an introduction, I will open it up. So let me more broadly say, if you have anything you'd like to say to the council on an item that is not on the agenda, now is the time to do it. And I welcome anybody to the podium. Yay or nay? Yes? Come on up. Hello.
My name is Josette Shaw. Nice to be in front of you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and all of you. I live in Burlingame. I also work in Burlingame, and I've been here 11 years working. And I've noticed that we have a big community now of diverse nationalities, as we all know. And with that, we get a lot of different and diverse cultures and what they bring. And I think some of that has to do with smoking. So we're going to see, for instance, our UPS driver might be smoking as he delivers his packages. Or we'll see the Uber driver in between his rides, taking a break somewhere. Or somebody that isn't working, they're taking a break and they're going for a cigarette break somewhere. And this does not have to do with marijuana, because if they have a license, they can smoke that. But what I do want to say, I'm a non-smoker and I've lived in California all my life, so I've seen the changes. I don't see how relative it's going to be if we start trying to control the smoking by doing little bans here and there, and how that's going to grow or change anything. I think California's done a great job with the laws that they put in place and making us 20 feet, I think, away smoking from a restaurant or public building. I think that's been come across very well. I just think if we start to allow these little ordinance and things like that to come about, it's going to get very nitpicky, and I don't know how that's going to get controlled. But I just want us to keep in mind that we have a lot of people that have come from all over the world here and have brought great business, and they live here and they pay taxes. And I don't think it's about going against the law. I think it's about just being a part of a community and being able to do that. So wanted to say.
Thank you very much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Any other comments of a general nature?
Dear Honorable Mayor, Council members, the manager and the whole staff. My name is Ali. Main topic is, yes, smoking ban in the business district, especially business areas. I agree that we supported that part because of not everybody is smoking. Some people are smoker, some people doesn't want to be the second-hand smoker on that part. But at the same time, I'm thinking, I'm not the cigarette smokers at the same time too. But how I can manage the people who is smoking next to me or around the people. So public area, smoking ban, I agree. And I don't want the people be bother another person, but at the same time, the privacy of the person's rights, and he wanna smoke in his patio, in his private area, or regarding to the ordinance, maybe out of the business district area, it's not hurting the people next to the business areas, or it's not in front of my restaurants or another places. That will be their choice. And of course, keeping under control, not providing with the younger ages, not providing the people who cannot smoke, but like getting the opportunity and giving the decision as a human being. This is their choice. After 21, we cannot say you cannot smoke. They can drink, they can smoke, and only the areas like the who cannot bother or who cannot hurt somebody's freedom too. So like we agree that banning the smokings on the streets, on the business district areas, but like we should keep it the privacy of the people's life at home, their patios and their private life. So that part is, I was thinking we should give some space for the people who wants to choose to smoke them. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your views. Are there any other comments tonight for public comment?
Good evening, Mayor and Councilman. I want my words to carry a different weight tonight because I've had family that have lived in Burlingame for over 30 years, just right here in Easton Addition. I have myself walked up and down Burlingame Avenue for the past 15 years, also Broadway Avenue. I've seen it evolve. I'm also a personal friend, some of the owners that are involved in these, in the business. And also I'm a restaurant owner myself. So seeing how the city has evolved over time has been really exciting. Obviously, it's going to bring new ventures and new challenges as we are here tonight for the topic of discussion for hookah and tobacco. But I can tell you it brings nothing but positivity to the neighborhood. It brings a great experience for people to enjoy. As she mentioned earlier, the diversity that is growing within the city. It's also coming from a personal restaurant owner that I know it's in a controlled manner, it's in a safe manner. So I don't see why there's any reason we should put a ban on that sector when it's bringing nothing but good for the people around. And it's in a controlled manner as well. And it brings a good, I think, nightlife to Burlingame, Broadway sector, which is nothing but improvement. I think that is good because it brings people together. It's nice nightlife. You can see now Burlingame Avenue has grown exponentially. There's wonderful restaurants. It's become a tourist destination. When people come into SFO, where do they travel? They come to Burlingame Avenue and Broadway. So I think that what we're discussing tonight is adding to that element of bringing more people in. So that's what I just wanted to share as a restaurant owner, as a resident of Burlingame, as a friend of the people here.
Thank you very much.
Of course. Thank you.
I should perhaps have said at the beginning that because this is non-agendized, we can't react to the comments, but we're listening very carefully.
Thank you, of course.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Bob Trahan. I'm the owner of 12 Month. I'm here today about all this tobacco stuff, and I admit I'm trying to catch up a little bit. For instance, the two agenda splits. But I made 12 Month to create a great experience. And I can think of three businesses that come to mind immediately: Society, Burlingame Tobacconist, and Patty Flynn's. And they all have curated tobacco experiences that I think are wonderful. They're clearly adult only. They're isolated in the back, in the Patty Flynn's case, I'd say. And I just think they're really great for our society. I say that as a smoke-free member of the class of 2000. That was the propaganda when I was a child. But I do think we've evolved as a society. It's not like people are getting duped into anything or what have you. I wanted to say I really appreciate as well the smoking ban in the public walking areas. I would consider that a very progressive, smart move, and I think it does make for a better environment. So for me, this is really about these, to me, separate, well-defined, you're going into a place called Burlingame Tobacconist kind of experiences that I think, consenting adults really enjoy and are ultimately good for our community. So thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. Any other comments tonight of a general nature?
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. I have a lot to say. I don't think that 3 minutes will be good enough for me, but I just want to cut it short. Since the day one that I'm trying to organize to follow up all the rules and requirements by the city is requesting from me and from my business partners, that I just want to mention that we are also supporting the smoking ban on the street avenues. But it's like if someone is smoking on the streets, that is going out of our control in the same time, but we want to make sure that we are like really supportive of this matter. And in the same time, for the smoking ban, that ordinance is gonna take some time to work on it, but whoever designed it at the first place, they might do something. They didn't mention a couple of things because they drove on the map and covering every lot. So like as we try to talk to the community and ask their opinion. So a lot of people were coming and trying to support us, but as you know, everybody has families and then they have like kids and work schedules. That's why we do design a petition form. I would like to provide that. And I have collected over 150 signatures from the people with their phone numbers and where they live, basically like Burlingame, Hillsborough, and some material like maybe 3 or 4 people. I would like to also bring it up with my business partner here with. So we also scan that and send it to you guys with the email. I don't know if you guys seen that. So thank you for giving the opportunity to share our thoughts, and we have other people to share. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and I expect to see you back in a couple of weeks, I think. Thank you very much. Are there any other comments of a general nature?
Thank you for this opportunity, Councillor and Mayor. Coming from the Middle Eastern background, I lived in Burlingame for 10 years, and I'm supportive of the proposed ordinance that bans smoking in the right way, but excludes patios on private property from ban. I know I have a lot of friends. I know a lot of people that don't smoke, but on their free time, on the weekends, I'm one of them. I'm always at the hookah lounge enjoying myself because it's part of our lifestyle. Growing up in the Middle East, again, that's our lifestyle. And without this lifestyle, it's not us. It's not who we are. And that's all I wanted to say. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for coming tonight. Appreciate your comments. Anybody else? That's the signatures. Very good. Okay, I see no other comments of public comments. I'll close.
We have emails.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
So our clerk is a little under the weather, so I'm going to do the emails for Megan. Her voice is gone. So I'm just going to do the emails. Some of these emails are combos about the ordinance and the flavored tobacco. So I'm just going to kind of wing it here. If people wrote directly to the council and they copied the public comment email, I am not reading it because the council has already seen it. So if you are one of those people who wrote to both council@burlingame.org and public comment@burlingame.org, the council has already seen your message. We appreciate it. I'm just going to read the ones that went straight to public comment. So here we go. You received a message from Lucy Kober. She says, I am a Burlingame resident and homeowner for the past 30 years. I do not approve of lessening the current tobacco laws in my community. Please keep the ban as it currently is. Rachel Sear wrote, please continue to enforce the unanimous decision that was put in place to remove flavored tobacco from our streets. I would like to see more integrity coming from our council. I appreciate Emily's unwavering stance. Sandra Lang, I am not reading your email because you sent it to both public comment and to the council email. David Whitman wrote, this is a hard one to read. Everything is in the subject line. Hello, with high inflation and international travel returning, scrolling here, to pre-pandemic levels with predictions that it will soon surpass those levels, why is your salary offer so low to city workers? You will obviously see a major increase in hotel tax revenue. And then there's a link to an SF Gates story or a SF Gov story about international travel. And then let's see, Linda Holden sent you messages for today and for next week. So the one for today looks like it is just about the pilot program. So I'll read that later. And then you received a message from Joseph Hamilton. Subject, dredging of Burlingame Creek under Crescent Avenue. Our Burlingame Creek adjacent neighborhood between El Camino and Occidental Avenue has requested that Public Works dredge the city property in the creek culvert under Crescent Avenue. That culvert has over the years been reduced from a size that neighbors recall, allowing them to comfortably walk through to now only a height of 4 feet at its apex. The situation has been exacerbated by the city very recently dredging the upstream culvert under Occidental Avenue, which now will result in even more water flowing to the Crescent Avenue culvert that was already unable to handle creek flows in a number of storms last winter. Public Works has responded that they cannot easily access this Crescent Avenue culvert to do this necessary work. We ask that the city fulfill their duty to maintain this part of the creek. Our neighbors who recently held a creek cleanup and have been committed to doing our part to maintain the creek will do whatever is required to allow access for this important dredging. And then he enclosed a petition with photos. I will share this with the Public Works Director.
Thank you.
And all the other emails, I will be back with you when we get to the ordinance.
Okay. And we're not doing live commentary, so
Correct.
that takes us through the public comment period. That takes us to the consent calendar. We have 7 items on it. Do any colleagues feel like pulling any of these items? Yes,
May I just pull item G very quickly?
yes, of course. Anything else?
Mr. Mayor, yes, I believe I need to recuse item C and D. Thank you.
I'm sorry, C and
D.
D. Okay,
So I will be,
but you can stay on the dais just.
yes, I will be abstaining from those two. So I don't know if we have to take them as a separate vote. Oh, I need to leave?
Why don't we take those two first?
Yeah.
Okay. You can depart.
Man, you're tough.
Actually, you could just go back there, I think.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Is that okay?
Okay, so in the interest of allowing our colleague to participate, I would welcome a motion to approve items C and D.
Motion to approve items, consent items C and D.
Wait,
Second.
Need public comment.
Oh, yes, that,
Would anyone like to comment on our consent
pull
calendar
anything
or pull any?
Just those two. You're doing those separately, so we want to.
I'm going to just ask.
All right.
Would anyone, like any item from consent, including C and D? I see none. Therefore, close the public hearing and I welcome the Vice Mayor.
all right. Motion to approve consent items C and D.
second.
A motion by Vice Mayor Coulson, seconded by Councilmember Ortiz. If we can have a roll call vote.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Yes.
Councilmember Beach, Vice Mayor Coulson,
Yes.
Mayor Brownrigg.
Yes, motion carries 4-0-1. I invite Councilmember Beach back. And so that would leave,
AE.
right, exactly. A, B,
A,
F.
B, E, F.
A, B, I'm sorry, A, B,
B.
A, B, E, F.
Mr. Mayor, move to approve items number 9A, B, E, and F.
Do I have a
Second.
Second, okay. Motion by Councilmember Ortiz, seconded by Vice Mayor Coulson for items 8A, B, E, F. If we could have a roll call vote.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Yes.
Councilmember Beach.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Coulson,
Yes.
Mayor Brownrigg.
Yes, and so that's approved. And then that takes us to item 8G, Vice Mayor Coulson.
Great, thank you. Just a quick pull off because I want to thank colleagues for supporting this resolution, which is this for the city to participate in Cora's Speak Up campaign at a very minimal cost of $10,000. The Speak Up campaign, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is a reach out campaign that the Chamber of Commerce and I believe even the bids have agreed to support us in, where we can educate the businesses, including the hotels on the Bayfront, the businesses in Burlingame, especially the ones where the public frequents, to help educate them about helping people who might be victims of domestic violence, to be able to understand what the resources are and have our staffs have those resources available. They might be placed in, say, for example, a bathroom or whatever. But, you know, in addition, say, for example, this is where our restaurant servers and people are so important. If there was something really problematic, they can share information with people and allow this not to escalate up to the police department and help people seek help who might not realize that they actually do have resources in San Mateo. So I just really thank the businesses and I want to thank the chamber in particular for really standing up quickly to get behind this.
Thank you. And thanks to the Vice Mayor for bringing this to the city's attention as well. It's a very worthy program. Any other comments from colleagues on this item? No. I already did public comment. Nobody wants to comment, so that would then close this out. And I'd welcome a motion.
Thank you. I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution to participate in the Chorus Speak Up campaign.
Second.
A motion by Vice Mayor Colson, seconded by Councilmember Beach to approve item 8G. If we could do a roll call vote.
Councilmember Stevenson.
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz.
Yes.
Councilmember Beach.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Colson.
Yes.
Mayor Brownrigg.
Yes, and that takes us through the consent. Thank you very much. And to our one policy matter of business tonight, which is introduction of an ordinance amending chapter 8.18 of the Burlingame Municipal Code to extend the ban on public smoking in the Broadway Business District to the downtown Burlingame Business District and to make a few other changes as well. Who is going to present? Mr. Spansale.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Thank you very much. I'll give the city clerk a few seconds here to pull up the presentation today. As you all know, and as we'll talk about in a second, we're here today to talk about the potential pilot.
I interrupt for a second. Do you know that there's a lever on the thing? There's actually, you can actually raise the podium.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
It might not,
May not work.
Might not go to my.
might have unplugged all that.
Oh.
Never mind.
You can bend down.
I'll
there you
spot.
You can scrunch.
Okay.
Very odd.
I'll make myself shorter. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So thank you very much for being here today, and we'll start the presentation here. What we're talking about today is a proposed ordinance for the pedestrian retail districts. And those are the two districts that we've created essentially in our two main bid areas, downtown and Broadway. And we're instituting potentially a pilot ban of smoking in those areas. Of course, as you know, we already have it on Broadway, and now we're looking at it in Burlingame. So next slide, please. So what the city council is considering today, as we just said, we're considering a 1-year smoking ban within the public right-of-way, and we're clarifying that around Broadway and downtown Burlingame. I'm also trying to incorporate other minor changes into our smoking ordinance, which is fairly old and often out of line with what the state currently has. So there's some non-substantive updates in there just to make sure that the public isn't confused. If they're reading our law right now, portions of it conflict with that state law. So we're making those changes. But I also really want to point out, and I think the mayor brought this up earlier today very well, the city council will not be considering, but they will be on November 20th, a potential exemption for the city's flavored tobacco ban for on-site hookah consumption and a potential county or city tobacco retailer permit program. So that would be on November 20th. Next slide, please. So just very quickly for anyone who wasn't able to attend the last meeting, I wanted to talk quickly about how we're able to regulate smoking. And that really comes down to the police power. The police power is not Chief Matucci back there necessarily. It's this council's ability to regulate certain portions of the community and what they can and can't do for the public health and safety. Now that police power is not unlimited, and it must be reasonably related to a legitimate government purpose and have a reasonable tendency to promote the public health, moral safety, or general welfare of the community. Secondhand smoke has been an identified health hazard. That's documented well, and you can read about some of those studies in the ordinance or in the staff report. But so therefore, the city council can use that police power that they have to ensure that the public is not subjected to secondhand smoke. So that's why we're able to regulate this here today. And as I said, the regulatory authority is not unlimited, and it can't conflict with state or federal law. Next slide, please. We talked a lot last session on October 2nd about state laws regulating smoking, mostly the California Clean Indoor Air Law, which was most recently updated in 2016, but it's been around a lot longer than that. And that's mostly about smoking indoors. It's saying that in a workplace, you can't smoke indoors except for very specific exceptions like a smoker's lounge or a retail tobacco store. Otherwise, that would violate state law. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't regulate smoking in most outdoor areas. And that's really what we're talking about today. Next slide. So you can read about the state law exceptions to the Labor Code 6404.5 or the California Clean Indoor Air Law. The full list of exceptions is in there, but the most common are a retailer wholesale tobacco shop. Today we've heard people refer to the tobacconist on Burlingame Avenue. something like that would be qualifying for that exemption. People would be allowed to smoke in there because it's specifically exempted under the state law. And a private smoker's lounge is actually a lounge that would be inside of a retail tobacco shop. I'm not necessarily certain if we have any of those in Burlingame, but essentially it could be a cordoned off area within there that maybe the tobacco shop itself doesn't have smoking allowed, but the smoker's lounge in the back might, or in the front, or wherever it may be. And finally, another thing that's really affected the interpretation of this law is the 2011 California AG opinion from the Attorney General Harris. This AG opinion really clarified that the exception for a smoker's lounge or the exception for a retail tobacco shop cannot exist in an area where food or beverage is served. So that really kind of limits what's considered a retail tobacco shop or smoker's lounge. Yes.
Ask,
Councilmember.
Please.
is beverage quantified as alcoholic beverage or any beverage?
My understanding is that it would be any beverage for sale. Next slide, please. So the next slide, since we are talking about potentially extending and expanding our current pilot program for an outdoor smoking ban, we wanted to see our outdoor smoking bans common. And we talked a little bit about this last time, but a lot of other local municipalities have banned smoking in public and private outdoor areas. Palo Alto's and Walnut Creek's ordinance are up there. I can let you take a look at those. At the bottom, you can also see San Mateo, Belmont, Menlo Park, South City have taken similar steps to ban both public and private outdoor areas. Next slide, please. This is just a continuation. There is the American Non-Smokers' Rights Foundation is a nonprofit organization, obviously, with an interest in stopping smoking. But they do track smoke-free laws, and most recently, they have it updated to October 1st, 2023, and they survey different municipalities across the nation, and of course, that includes California, and approximately 117 municipalities within California. And in case you're wondering, there are well over 450 municipalities in California, so about a quarter of them have enacted 100% smoke-free outdoor dining and bar patio. So this is something that isn't necessarily the majority, but it's certainly not uncommon what we're talking about tonight. Next slide, please. So then I want to talk very briefly about what the ordinance would do. It would extend the outdoor smoking ban on or around Broadway until December 31st, 2024. It is not a permanent ban, and I'll show you the language later. It will expire if we don't take action here. It's going to add an identical pilot ban to the downtown Burlingame area, and we'll look at a map of what that means in a second. It's going to clarify that the ban only applies to the public right-of-way and not private property, because I know that was a big point of clarification, and we want to make sure that our businesses understand that. And we'll talk a little bit about what the public right-of-way means as well. And it's going to make other minor changes to existing smoking regulations to make sure that we really line up with state law. Next slide, please. What it's not going to do is it's not going to make any proposed changes to the city's current flavored tobacco ban. Again, that'll be next week. It would not legalize smoking in any area where it's currently prohibited. So even though we're talking about exempting back patios are actually, in most areas, you're able to smoke in that right now. It's just that most businesses have said that their patrons cannot smoke on that private property. And it would not contemplate a tobacco retailer permit program. Each of these are going to be discussed at the next city council meeting on November 20th. Next slide. So first, this is kind of the bulk of it. I'll mention a few of the minor amendments we're doing later. It looks like Councilmember Beach has a question.
Is it okay if because my question is relevant to the last slide.
Sure. Can you pull us back to the last slide? Thank you.
Would this proposed ordinance, my understanding is it would not require smoking to be allowed in private places. So if a private bar or restaurant wanted to enforce no smoking on their private patio, they could do that. It's just they have the option of allowing smoking.
Absolutely.
You're tracking with what I'm saying. This is
completely understand. And that's what a lot of businesses right now have done. They have made their patios or their open area seating smoke free.
Right.
This is not in any way saying that the state or that the city is going to force that business to allow smoking.
to allow options. Yeah, they're not forced.
There is no force whatsoever. That private property owner can take whatever restrictions they would like. This is just not taking the overt step of saying, even if you wanted to allow smoking, we're not going to let you.
Vice Mayor Coulson.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, please.
One other follow-up.
Yes.
Does this would this comply with, would businesses who do allow smoking on private property on their back patio still have to comply with state regulations about distance from a building, et cetera, or is that?
There aren't necessarily as many distance from a building regulations in state law. There is distance from a public building.
Okay, it's
a
public building.
Building.
Okay.
We also have a lot of regulations against playgrounds, park areas, things like that. And there's 20 feet away from those. If that business was 15 feet away from a playground, they would actually not be allowed to do this, even in the areas that we're saying are exempted.
Okay, I didn't understand that. So those distance requirements really are driven by public buildings for or
Public, state, county, city, any building like that would require that 20 feet, but not necessarily any private building. There are some intricacies of the multifamily unit buildings that we have here, but other than that, like a private business or a restaurant, there is no 20-foot restriction currently.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Wilson?
Yes, thank you. And the parklets that we currently temporarily have, they are private property, but they are on city.
They are public right of way. So this
Right of
smoking ban would
be
not,
included in the, no smoking in parklets.
there would be no smoking in parklets.
Right.
Unless somehow the parklet was situated on private property, which I do not
That would be
understand we have.
not a parklet.
Exactly.
Right? That would be their own backyard covered dining
Exactly.
experience.
Councilmember Stevenson?
No.
Okay. Next slide, please. So again, going now into a little bit more detail on the proposed smoking ban in the two main pedestrian retail districts. Next slide. So this is the actual language that we're looking at here. And you can see this is 8.18.040 prohibition of smoking in public places. And Megan, if you could go to the next slide as well. This is really the only changes we're making here. It's a very simple amendment to the language. Obviously, it's got bigger effects than the two lines there, but it is very simple. It's saying that in addition to and not in place of all the other prohibitions in the chapter, and that kind of goes back to what Councilmember Beach was talking about. If there is somebody near a park or a playground, this isn't going to trump that. This is an addition to it. All others prohibitions in this chapter, smoking shall also be prohibited within the public right-of-way in the following open spaces. So that's throughout the downtown and Broadway pedestrian retail districts, and it will expire at midnight on December 31st, 2024. So obviously we will be back in front of you should you choose to adopt this first reading here today. We will come back prior to the expiration of this to determine the will of the council next year. Next slide, please. Here are just a couple maps. I think you might all be very familiar with the Broadway pedestrian retail district. This is the same map. There's been no amendments to it from when we brought this last time, but we do have a new map for the downtown pedestrian retail district. And that's here. So for those who might have been wondering if it was just Burlingame Avenue, it's not. It follows the map of the bid, and it was put together by our community development director. And the language is mirrored in the ordinance as well, and the definitions showing which streets it is, but this map here will be what controls. There are colors outside of the black line, but those are just zoning districts. The black line is the border of the downtown pedestrian retail district. Next slide, please. So then quickly, we'll talk about where smoking would be prohibited in these two districts. It's going to be in all open spaces on city streets, sidewalks, and easements, including parklets, and in all indoor workplaces other than the tobacco shops or smokers' lounges, as we talked about earlier.
Just a quick clarification. Everywhere we say smoking, one can also say vaping, right?
Yes, you can. We clarified that in the definitions this time because we understood that that was the council's direction. Where would smoking still be prohibited in these two districts? Obviously in retail tobacco shops and smokers' lounges, but also in non-enclosed spaces on private property, commonly patios, including outdoor dining areas not within the public right-of-way. I think one important clarification here is there's no back patio versus front patio. If it's on private property, it is not therefore in the public right-of-way, so smoking would be permitted. We were a little nervous about determining what is a back patio versus what is a front patio, but essentially anything that is owned by the city, sidewalk, any area that will not be exempt, will be under this. Yes, Councilmember Wilson.
So I've noticed that, especially in the downtown Burlingame area, there are many workers that smoke on the parking lots. They might stand, come around the corner, stand by where their like trash or something is and smoke there. So, and I suspect it's because there is no outdoor space in the restaurants or establishments in which they serve and participate. So would those spaces now they would no longer be able to smoke on the parking lot?
They would not be able to.
Okay.
Any other questions on this slide? So quickly, I'll go over a few other, oh, sorry, Council.
And a patio is defined by unenclosed, no roof, right? Kind of a thing, or?
So we're paralleling the state's definition generally for unenclosed spaces. So an enclosed space has a specific definition under California state law.
What is that definition?
I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me at this exact moment, but I can certainly, maybe my colleague, my boss, pull it up really quickly. But in the ordinance, we do talk about enclosure. So in the ordinance itself, the enclosed space is there under the definitions, and you can read that here. But essentially, it's anywhere that's not open. So it can't have a roof and walls. It can't have no gap. But if there was, let's say, a 3-foot gap between a roof and a fence, that would not be closed. If it was 9 feet of fence and then a roof that goes right over it, and that is not a permeable fence, I would probably consider that to be enclosed, but we would defer back to the building department and what they determined was an enclosed space.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. So for an unenclosed patio on private property, they're still restricted based on the law, on the California state law around clean air requirements, so they're not exposing employees to that smoke. So I'm thinking about somebody who has a private patio, but maybe in the front they're serving beverages and food, but in the back they've designated a private smoking area. What happens to the employees that may go out to the back?
So actually in the back right now, under California state law, we talked about hookah last time and the food and drinks there, and a smoker's lounge for inside about food and drink. Right now, you can have an outdoor smoking area where you serve food and drink as long as it's tobacco smoke.
Okay.
So that is actually not covered by California state law.
Okay.
I think that is something that's commonly wondered though, because right now most businesses do not allow that. I think there's been a trend towards not allowing smoking in dining establishments, but that's not necessarily meaning that it's illegal under state law. Quickly, I'll go over the other proposed changes. Next slide, please. These are just a couple examples. This isn't the full list of the other proposed changes, but we're updating smoking definitions to state law. And Councilmember Beach, I apologize, here is the enclosed definition right here. So enclosed shall have the same definition as California state law. Of course, I referred to it there and it doesn't have the full, but we're incorporating that California state law definition. And that's typically what we've done for everything, for smokers lounges, for retail tobacco shops. We had our own definition prior that mostly mirrored the state law, but we didn't necessarily refer to the state law. And the California Attorney General opinion is so integral to each of those definitions that we wanted to incorporate that in any future that may be issued to ensure that we're not violating state law just by not keeping up with the times and not mirroring them. And then we also corrected some outdated language, which would appear to legalize smoking in areas. Our law still said that smoking was allowed in indoor bars. It certainly is not under the California state law. So we just went in there and made those corrections to make sure that since we are amending this ordinance, we took the steps to clean it up too. Next slide. Not just leave set questions.
Thank you for a very thorough overview. I know we were all asking questions along the way, but are there any other questions for Mr. Spansdale? Yes, Vice Mayor Colsey.
Could we please put the downtown Burlingame map up? the Broadway district is pretty easy. So it's everything within that black line.
Everything within the black line.
Is there any way that it could be a more compressed area than in the black line? In other words, could we focus solely on, say, for example, Burlingame Avenue?
I think I mean, it's certainly possible. It's all within the will of the council. It's going to have to depend on what we believe is the most pedestrian heavy area. But I think if you went inwards instead of outwards, I think that wouldn't necessarily be an issue. However, that would require us to amend the ordinance and bring it back for a new first reading.
And the only reason I do bring that up is because I think to me, the objective here is to protect the pedestrians that are mainly walking, and dining on sort of Burlingame Avenue. And I'm a little concerned of the magnitude of size of this, especially around like Chapin and some areas where, there just are people who work in our downtown who smoke. And right now, that worker, if they work, say, at Safeway or something, and they're out in the back, they're gonna have to walk, a block and a half down to a residential neighborhood and stand in front of a residential home or in a residential neighborhood and take their break and smoke and then come back. And I'm a little worried that this broad, massive space will push smokers out into the neighborhoods.
Yeah, it's a good point. I'm going to open it up to public comment in a minute, but I do think Vice Mayor Coulson's observation is something we should come back to in conversation about the ordinance. Are there any other questions for Mr. Spansale? No. Yes, Vice Mayor, I'm sorry, Councilmember Beach.
Yeah, if we were to, given the proposed ordinance that allows smoking in outdoor patios, is there a way that you could think of code enforcement could very carefully track any kind of complaints that are received over the next year to study, just to see if it's working and whether or not that's of concern? And is there a way to track them in a way that we can get accurate information, but also provide some kind of anonymous or protection of people that may be concerned about making complaints, hearing some of that?
So I've just basing this off of Walnut Creek, which is one that a lot of inspiration from, and in terms of the pedestrian retail districts, that what they did was just set up an anonymous email account that could send those complaints to, and they were able to track it there. Obviously, it's still going to be an educational first policy, and we're not necessarily going to be taking the hardest stance on enforcement at the beginning because we want to make sure the community
I guess I'm focused more on the patio, the public, the private space, allowing smoking, expanding out and saying, hey, you can have as much smoking, just see if it's working for the community members who live around, or is that a concern before we come back and maybe consider extending it or changing it in the end of 2024, just to track any kind of complaints.
So to track a way to, in case the council next year wanted to potentially expand the ban to patio areas.
If that were a concern, if it's working fine and complaining, then we'll know that, but that we could really track it intentionally to see if there's any.
Staff could definitely look into it.
Okay.
And making sure that we capture that data to have it there for you in around a year.
I guess I do, reflecting on Vice Mayor Coulson and Councilmember Beach's questions, I guess I do have a question. So imagine, take one of the real estate offices that's on Donnelly that is next to a private parking lot. Okay, so that's private space. Their worker, as I understand it, would be allowed to go out into his parking lot or her parking lot and smoke a cigarette.
If it's outdoor, yes.
Right?
Yes.
And if you work at, I'm just making it up, you work at Molly Stone's, you walk outside in their parking lot, you could smoke a cigarette. Is that right?
Today you could, yes.
Sorry?
Today you could. This ordinance would not allow that. This
But why is that different than a restaurant that has an outdoor smoking area?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm confusing myself. Yes, they could.
They could, right?
Yes.
Okay. Then
Safeway parking lot.
Safeway parking lot, I mean,
It is not public right of way, so it would not apply to this.
right. That's what I just wanted to clarify in my own.
Okay, yeah,
Yes.
appreciate that. clarification.
But
Thank you. Okay. Did you have something?
yeah, and so, but public parking lots are included, obviously, right? I mean,
Public would,
Exempted?
yeah, public are, yeah.
Yeah, any area that's not public right of way. So if the city had an easement through a parking lot for, a culvert dig out or something, technically that would not be there. I don't think.
you can't smoke
going-
in our parking lots. You can
Yes.
smoke in your own.
Yeah, that's the question. Yeah,
Absolutely.
can't smoke in our parking.
You cannot smoke, you cannot go into the back here and smoke behind City Hall.
Okay. I'm going to open it up to the public, if I may, Mr. Spansale, may I call you back?
Of course.
Thank you very much for the overview. Would anyone like to join us for comments on this extension?
Root?
Former council member Root, good to see you. Yeah,
I won't be back for a while, I don't think. I think you ought to support the 1-year program for both avenues as is. And then you've got time to fool around with it and fine tune it once you see how it's working. As some of you know, I was involved a few years ago in establishing a prohibition of smoking in dwelling units, apartments and condos. So I do have an interest in this. So give it a try. Obviously, you've got a very skilled person here that's worked on this. You've had a chance to see how Broadway operates and come back after you've watched it for a year and then fine tune it.
Thank you very much
Thanks.
for that input. And thanks for sticking with us. We appreciate the input. Would anyone else like to comment?
Instead of just a comment,
Can I ask you to speak a little closer to the microphone?
Okay.
I have a hard time.
I've been listening every single detail the city attorney was sharing with us, and then just wanna come up with kind of question and comment at the same time. So as a business owner on the Broadway, when you guys drawing everything that I see on the Broadway section, it's covering the whatever the business and lots on the Broadway on the map, but the following street is not covering.
But the what isn't covered?
The behind parallel street is not covering, as I see that. But property is in the lots. So we are talking about the street, avenues, or properties. That's street. Yeah.
Street,
I just
the public
wanna-
sidewalk, the street, the public sidewalk, and any public park or public parking lot, but not the private back patio.
Yeah. And then my second point was if someone wants to complain, so I'm a small business owner, I'm doing some investment. If you guys open an anonymous email, I don't know who's going to send as a complaint any kind of matter for the smoking, specifically for this user, this is happening and that is happening. So far, I've been running this business little over a year, and I don't see any of the people was complaining because we are not talking about my business. We are talking about the smoking ordinance. So Councilor Emily was asking to the attorney, what if someone is sending a complaint, that how we can track that? So I have no power to check the people and check their opinion while I'm trying to do the business in the same time. What I'm doing, I just want to make it clear for a second. Since the meeting started, I just stopped doing and trying to follow up every single regulations. And during this time, I lost 95% of my business, and I had to lay off almost 5 people. Based on that, I'm getting sued from those people while I'm losing the business, plus dealing at the court at the other things, labor court and stuff like that. So, and plus during this time also the building department was requesting me for the enclosing space that I need to adjust the space to say the attorney mentioned, like 7 feet, and then the 3-4 feet like open space top of the roof, so I can have a open space to serve the hookah. So while I'm doing all those expensive, trying to show my good faith, and I just want you to guys consider that point too. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the commentary. Vice Mayor Coulson.
So I actually think that this is a very interesting and good point raised, which is when you have anonymous complaint filing, to me, that is not as, if someone is going to file a complaint and they attach their name to it, and we know that it is one authentic complaint, you know, there's authenticity around it, versus say someone who, you know, comes in and maybe sends 25 or 30 emails, you know, I guess I would want to be able to understand that these are individual authentic complaints, right? Mhm. And I really particularly feel, I feel this is really important because in the last 2 weeks, I've had numerous complaints filed against me at the FPPC anonymously. And it is very frustrating when someone files a complaint against you. They were all unfounded, every single one of them. But when multiple people are filing anonymous complaints against you for things that that are not happening, it is frustrating. And I have no way to know who that person is or what they're doing. And it basically is just pure harassment. And it's targeted pure harassment. And that is what I'm very concerned about, is that we will have, you know, bigoted, targeted harassment that is not authentic and not legitimate. So I want to make sure we have a way to verify that.
The concern being.
Agreed.
Yeah, the concern being that if somebody were to say, I saw someone smoking at
No.
place X.
The concern is more like one person sits down and sends 40 unauthenticated complaints. And so when we look at the complaint numbers, it's like, well, there were 287 complaints. And we find out that, you know, when you look at IP addresses or something, that they all generated from 2 or 3 people.
Got it.
And I think what that does is it sort of undermines, I think the businesses want to solve a complaint. If someone's complaining against a business about smoke wafting into their, you know, they want to, and I'll take the tobacco shop just as an example. I think they have invested over $350,000 into their smoke recapture and filtration systems because they were sensitive to their neighbors having to deal with secondhand smoke. And so if you get an authentic complaint and then you can step up and address it, I think that's really important to be able to do versus someone who, like in my situation, just complains and complains and complains about you, and there's nothing founded. It's frustrating.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Beach.
I appreciate the concerns. I hope that when I brought the idea up that the city can verify that they are somehow legitimate complaints, but that the person's identity that could be concerned about a complaint, maybe they're living near and it's uncomfortable, that they can be protected against any retaliation or something. That would be the issue that I was trying to bring up. Not that it could be an email that is just, you know, completely
maybe just
non-legitimate. And that's why I asked the question, is there a way that we could sort of, the city could investigate, know what's going on, but somehow protect the identity in case people feel concerned that that could hinder them from bringing forth a complaint?
So we can't, of course, make anyone announce a name if they submit a code enforcement complaint and they do not want to disclose their identity. That's something we don't do. But what we're describing here right now is something that code enforcement and the police department do all the time, which is receive complaints, go and independently verify, but don't necessarily speak out about the person or their identity to the person who's being accused. So
that would be the concern.
Right. And I think that's that in and of itself is authentic because then it allows the person to whom the complaint is, against whom the complaint is being filed, to remedy the situation and work with the person or, you know, the police department or the code enforcement agency. And I have never once found any of the tobacco, the any of the three tobacco places that we're talking about tonight, GG, Society, I think, and then the tobacco shop. Never have I think they've all tried hard to comply and listen to complaints and try to address them. And I think we owe that to them, in fairness.
Thank you. Councilmember Ortiz?
Yeah, I just want to take a step back and talk about the reason I voted for the Broadway ban originally was not to save the smokers, but to save those who were walking by from the nuisance of the cigarette smoke or from the secondhand smoke and the damage that that may cause. So to me, and so look at what happened in Broadway. I think what happened in Broadway was a success. I think we've proven it. I think it's been, I haven't had a lot of complaints. I think there's still some people breaking the rules, but at least it gives others the ability to call somebody in or go out and talk to these people and try to move them out of the way. So again, I'm not trying to stop people who want to smoke from smoking. I just don't want them to smoke all over us other people who don't care for the cigarette smoke and so in that respect, I think it's been a success, and I'm all in favor of expanding it to the Burlingame downtown. Now, how do we chop up the map that we have for downtown where it's fair? As long as there's retail and there's people walking by the retailers, that should be included in that map. So I'm not in favor, and I don't see how we would cut it back to make it so it would make sense. So for me, I would go along with the map that's been presented, just as a matter of fairness, because again, I don't know how I would cut that up and explain to this.
I know.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were done with public comment.
Well, we may be, but
I take all of that back.
Have a lot of email.
we don't need to hear it again. Well said.
I take it all back. I'll be ready to say it again in 5 minutes.
But this is the time for public comment. And so if anyone else would like to comment on this question, now's the time.
And I have emails.
Oh, email.
Yes, emails. Isn't that great that people are exercising their opportunity to comment?
You do a good job. So
And I was on.
let's go to the email.
All right, we have one from John Cabranian. Dear Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members, thank you for discussing the temporary smoking ban for Broadway and Burlingame Avenue business districts. The ordinance on the temporary smoking ban has been very successful. The community and the businesses have been very supportive. I highly recommend the city post no smoking signs around the business district. The signage will help with public awareness. Thank you again for considering this ordinance. Looking forward for your support. We have a message from Linda Holden. This is where she has her letter. Good evening. I've lived in Burlingame for 37 years. I am a volunteer lead legislative ambassador for the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network. The no smoking pilot program should be made permanent and extended to Burlingame Avenue as well. These are the two main pedestrian retail shopping areas in Burlingame. With so many youth hanging out on both, it would be nice not to have them see someone smoking as well as secondhand smoke, health hazards. In closing, this is 2023, and we as a city need to stand up and take a stand against tobacco use in our beautiful city. We need to do what is right for all of our future generations that will live here. Thank you. Couple more. Bear with me here. Sari McConnell writes, please extend the ban on smoking on Broadway and on Burlingame Avenue. Voting any other way goes against all the advances we have made in making sure secondhand smoke doesn't impact the health of innocent families who frequent these spaces. It's also a quality of life issue. Smoke-free spaces have become the expectation. I'd also like to ask you to prevent flavored tobacco and hookah shops from reemerging in Burlingame. We have real issues with young people and smoking. The flavored tobacco is designed explicitly to appeal to young people. Let's not make it any easier for them to get their hands on it in Burlingame. And I have two more. Trisha Barr writes, dear Burlingame City Council, people should be able to be in any public place without having the impact of smoke or vape. The current proposed smoking ban is a step in the right direction. I would hope the city would consider going further and broadening the ban to all public places, as plenty of other cities have done. And she's the co-chair of the San Mateo County Tobacco Education Coalition. And last, we have Francesca from Alana's. Writes, I would like to express my support as a business owner on the Avenue, the smoking ban pilot program to be implemented. My employees, who are all non-smokers, also feel strongly about not having to be subjected to cigarette or cigar smoke. Thank you for your interest in expanding this program. And that is all.
Thank you very much. And thanks to the letter writers. At this point, I think we are done with public comment. Mr. Ortiz, that was, your position was clearly stated.
I was on a roll, Mr. Mayor. I was on a roll.
You were, you were.
But yeah, I think I forgot what I said, so I'm gonna leave it at that.
Could we pull that map back up one second?
Yes, Vice Mayor Colson asks to, review the Burlingame map. There we go.
All right, so black line inward. So for example, the new apartment building
Is out.
and the park is obviously out, but the sidewalk in front of the park is not out.
No, the park is the, or which, you mean?
The park is the little green one.
Huh?
Right? So one
Primrose.
Primrose. No, the new Lorton Park.
The new one's outside the black.
The new one's outside the black line. So you could stand and smoke in front of the park, but not in,
Oh, I see what you mean.
right? You can stand and smoke.
Can't be
in front
within
of
20 feet of a park.
Okay, you can't be in front of the park. So you're over on the side. Okay, so we've got the park, we've got the new multifamily residential. I'm just kind of looking at the retail lines. And let's see, you can't smoke in front of the library and you can't smoke in front of City Hall. All right.
It does seem to have done a pretty good job of capturing commercial businesses.
Yeah, yes. And let's see, that goes to there's an apartment building, all right. And let's see, no, Walgreens is in, and then the corner there is out on Howard. What's on the corner of Howard there? One in the pink? Church?
The church.
That's the church.
Okay, so the church is out, not in the commercial district. Okay, yeah, I mean, that seems that if we're really going to focus on, if we're going to focus on the commercial district, and I feel better that they can, my issue is really just if you're not allowing any smoking at all in this district, then what happens is people will have to walk out of this district and stand 2 feet into the residential neighborhood and chain smoke. And there will become these little tiny enclaves, people smoking. And, smoking is legal at 21 years of age and above. And we have a number of people who recently immigrated or migrated to this community, into this community or from other countries. And I have a number of friends who smoke, and they've tried hard to give it up, and I don't want to sort of criminalize a behavior that has unfortunately been, addictive to people and make them somehow feel shamed. I want to protect people without making people who do choose to smoke legally at the age of 21 and over. I don't want to make them feel ostracized from our community. I want to still make sure that those people are welcome. And, if this helps them to maybe think that they want to quit smoking, great, that's a fantastic thing. But I just want to be very careful about sort of targeting people just because they smoke, because people drink, people smoke marijuana, people do a lot of things that at age 21 are illegal. And I don't really want to be the morality police. I want to be protective and help people who are enjoying our downtown to do so in a safe way.
Well said. Are you comfortable with the black line though?
I am comfortable with the black line, given the clarification from Assistant City.
And this is a one-year program.
And a one-year program, so we can
So,
see. Mhm.
Councilmember Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of questions, and maybe this data doesn't exist, but I know we've had the ban now in Broadway. It's a much tighter retail district. If you could put the map up on Broadway.
Just the slide before.
Yeah, it's just the slide before. So I'm curious if there's been behavior observations about smokers who might be on the Broadway area going into the residential areas to smoke. Has there been any feedback on that front?
Not that we've received in the code enforcement realm. I can't speak to whether the police department's received anything, but it certainly hasn't been brought to the attention of us, which I'm sure it would have been had that occurred. So I think it's comfortable to say that that has not been a major issue.
Okay.
Okay. Councilmember,
I guess I just would be curious if there's any final comment from staff about enforcement. I remember when we passed this really in Broadway, the concern was that it's really an educational campaign. It's a way to talk about, we have a smoke-free zone. This is, now that it would be to Burlingame Avenue, is it sort of the same approach during this extended pilot period? Are we going to be sending our police officers out to ticket and enforce? And then I have one follow-up question. Thank you.
I think generally it'll be a similar approach to what we did, especially this is a new program to the downtown area. I mean, Broadway's had it for about a year now, but Burlingame Avenue has not had it yet. I think one thing that we can do, and we can certainly take the direction of council, is if, there was some money to be allocated for signs, we could put on signs in the public right of way with this here if we wanted to do that. I think we were hesitant to do so because it was the pilot program. We certainly don't need to. But it is something that we could try to advertise more to make sure it's clear on the streets. But in terms of having police officers walk the street and ticket, I think that would take a very extreme case for that to be necessary.
Exactly. And I just, I want us to just have a reality check about this for everybody in the room who may be listening. This is really about education and trying to have a healthier environment, and let's see how it goes. I support the proposal. I do support close monitoring of complaints on all sides of this. If we are getting feedback that this is too onerous and this is just a complete, overreach, I would like to know about those complaints. If we are getting complaints that people are concerned there's still too much smoke on an X location, we'd like to know about that. I would like to protect the individual identities so that people aren't, that it's vetted properly through city staff, but that those folks, if they are making complaints, are protected in some ways from people who may be demanding, well, who's making this complaint. But I do think it's important to track all sides of this so that we can have a reasonable discussion about a year from now to see if we want to extend it or make it more permanent. Thanks.
okay. Councilmember Stevenson.
Yeah, I'm supportive of the current outline in favoring expanding the program to include Burlingame Avenue area.
Okay, well, me too. So that I'll, in just a second, I'll ask somebody to make a motion to introduce the ordinance and all of that. I would just say that I think it is important to this enforcement point. It was, I think, important to this council that the initiative on Broadway came from the Broadway merchants, broadly polled, and it was clear to them that if this was going to have any actual effect, it's going to be them self-policing, not the state. And I don't feel, to be honest, that we've had the same buy-in from the Burlingame bid. I think we've had loose commentary about like, oh, it sounds like a really great idea, which is fine. But if we adopt this as I expect us to, then I think it's really important for us to tell them, the bid, if you want this to work, you're going to have your members self-policing. Okay, let's be clear about it.
Yeah.
It's got to be moral suasion and maybe signposts, that's fine, but it's not going to be men and women in blue writing tickets. Okay. So with that, then I think we've talked this through. I think we have a point of view. I would welcome a motion to introduce, right? Don't we have to do that?
Yeah, just a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to make that motion to, I guess, is it to publish a summary of the ordinance? Making a motion to determine whether or not to bring the ordinance back for adoption?
That's correct.
Yes, I make a motion to bring the ordinance back for adoption.
Second.
A motion by Councilmember Beach to extend the Broadway smoking ban to the Burlingame Avenue commercial area and make other changes. Seconded by Councilmember Ortiz. If we could do a roll call vote.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz.
Yes.
Councilmember Beach,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Coulson,
Yes.
Mayor Brownridge.
Yes, thank you very much for the thorough work. Thank you to members of the audience for sticking around. Everything seems important. It's always a bummer when yours is last. I apologize. But anyway, we've extended the smoking ban, and that'll be a good experiment for us to try. That takes us to staff reports and communications. They're in our packet. And then future agenda items. Are there any matters that colleagues would like to raise in the future? Councilmember Beach.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I'm just reaching out to colleagues to see if there's an appetite to have a further discussion. We had a agenda item on our consent calendar, October 2nd, about monitoring remote public comment. And that was that, staff would monitor and may need to remove the public's ability to comment live via Zoom and remotely. And there's certainly been some horrific incidents of bad behavior via Zoom, but I wonder if this is an appropriate discussion for us to have as council for whether or not we want to have some kind of modification or eliminate public comment via Zoom.
Yeah, I would.
Or leave as is.
I would second that, and I guess we've dealt with the same thing at CCAG and received some guidance from the county legal counsel, so I would definitely second that.
So then we will have a conversation about the policy on public comment. And I'm sure we all have points of view, so we'll share them. Okay, anything else? Seeing none, I don't have anyone to close in memory of. Does anybody else? All right. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you. Good meeting, Mr. Mayor.